Okay, we are live here on the John Riley Project. This is episode number 175. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And today we are just so honored to have as our guest Poway City Council candidate Chris Olps. Chris, returning to the John Riley Project. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back.
You were with us in May of 2019. You had your big announcement when you announced your candidacy publicly here on the podcast. That was a great honor. So thanks for sharing that with our audience.
Definitely, thank you.
You know, it's funny is like we're dealing with round numbers. You were like episode number 50, and now you're number 175. So
I didn't plan it.
Funny how that works. So all good. Yeah. So I'm hoping we're going to get a chance to talk about all things Poway, talking about your candidacy. And, we'll be taking questions and comments from our friends and neighbors and supporters on our live stream. We'll be broadcasting on Facebook and on YouTube. And already the viewers are coming in. So this is great. So we welcome everyone's comments and questions here in chat. You could just respond in the YouTube or Facebook comments. We'll get them. We'll make sure Chris sees those questions so he can answer them. But we do invite the dialogue with the audience so we can make it interactive and fun. And it's just not Chris and I, it's getting everybody involved. So Chris, just, a lot of people are probably still, maybe some people getting to know you. Can you give us, just before we get started, kind of like the 1 minute overview of your candidacy and why you're running?
Yeah, a lot of 1 minute speeches, so hopefully I'll get close to that.
This is just the beginning, right? Because we're going to go unlimited time here.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to have a jumping off point.
Yeah, so I've lived in Poway, I think a little over 30 years now, or close to 30 years. And growing up here, it was, the community of choice because I didn't have a choice. I was a kid. So it was nice. I went through, Tierra Bonita, Twin Peaks, Poway High School. Left, joined the Navy. When I got out of the Navy, kind of was around a little bit. My parents were still here, so I was basically back here a lot, but kind of got my own place, got on my feet, and then decided to settle in Poway with my wife and, settle down, have kids. And, now I've got a 9-year-old and a 9-month-old. So a little bit of an age gap there, but, now my son's going to Garden Road. My daughter is gigantic. She is really, really big. The doctor is, keeping track of all of that stuff, but she's in the 99th percentile for her size. So she's 9 months old wearing like 1.5 old clothes. It's like
all right.
Huge. So she's already trying to walk and, very vocal. There's, seeing the differences between my son when he was, growing up and, toddler phase and her, it's night and day difference, but so similar all the same, It's right. It's very interesting. So, but yeah, we settled here. And then about 6 years ago. Yeah, well, 6 years ago now. I ran for the first time, 2014. I ran again in 2016. Each time it was, there were reasons I was running. The first time it was all about figuring out the process, getting in touch with my community. And I was the only candidate that wasn't an incumbent. Next time it was still the same sort of issues, but I had kind of learned more. And then I found 9 other people running. So it was, okay, let's start networking with people and learning. And now it's the districts. So it's very specific to what is happening in South Poway and what the community concerns are here. But I've been hearing community concerns for, going on 6 years now about what we have, what problems there are, what people feel from council or the city. And that's why I'm here. I want to make that difference and hopefully, for the better. I don't want to make people worse. I want to make people, hey, I'm not being heard. Now I'm being heard. And for some, maybe they're being heard too much and be like, well, maybe we can figure out some balance there because I definitely want people involved. But, I can understand if they're overwhelmed by it. When you jump into that pool, it is a deep pool. So.
Well, one of the things that I really like about your candidacy is that you have small children. And yes. Actually, one of your opponents is the same. And that's what makes your race so different because so many of the other people running are, they're largely empty nesters. And you have children that are going through school here, children that will be participating in a lot of the recreational and educational activities in the city. So I think it's great that you, as a candidate, have small children that are going to experience Poway in their own way, and you want to make it a better place for them to live, right?
Absolutely, it's that vested interest. I mean, I grew up here and had my childhood, which I loved. It kind of helped me become how I am, and the values that I have. Obviously, some of that's from the Navy as well, but the community is really one of those unique aspects. Everyone talks about how out in the towards the east mid country areas where you have these really small towns and your neighbor. Well, I really feel Poway is that almost perfect balance of the really small town feel and just big enough that you don't have to drive for 3 hours to a big city. We're right in that happy medium where you do know your neighbors. You still are involved in the community. When something happens down the street, or you see somebody somebody falls off their bike, most likely who they are. You can help them, drive them to their house. If a dog gets out, you drive them to their
Right,
whatever it is. And we're that small city, whereas or small town almost. Whereas, you go downtown San Diego or some of these other communities, and you pick up the dog, you're calling on the phone, probably not finding who it is, have to go drop it at the Humane Society or something like that. So we definitely have that feel, and it's something that is slowly but surely going away, and that's sad in a lot of ways. I want to make sure that Poway at least maintains that, or maybe keeps it for forever, but a long time, really. I want my kids to have those kinds of experiences.
Well, it seems like a lot of people figure Poway is like the Goldilocks zone, right? It's
Yes.
it's just right? But a lot has been changing, especially in District 4, in the district where you're running. I mean, there's construction going up and down Poway Road with, the Commons and the Outpost and the community center, and they've been, there was the Fairfield project was being discussed, and I got to imagine the development must be one of the most important or largest things you're hearing from voters. Is that what you're getting?
So I'm hearing pretty much everything related to development. So development is a big topic. Obviously there's the end product of whatever building, but there's the other part of that with traffic. Oh, sorry. Gotta take a moment here.
All right, so we have a candidate kissing babies. Here we go.
Yes, sorry, she's going to pick up her son. It's the first day back to school. You gotta, deal with things because they're no longer distance learning. They're doing the half days sort of thing. So our son is on a PM schedule, and that means he starts at 11:35, I want to say, and then pickup is 2:10. So right after this started.
What's her name?
Oh, this is Olympia. Olympia Rain Olps. Yes,
beautiful.
That's her name.
Like,
that's her name.
Is that a giraffe?
We call her Ellie for the most part, but
okay.
I'm sure she's good at getting in trouble. So we're gonna see a lot of Olympia Rain Olps. The three name. You're in trouble type of thing. But she's a good kid. She's very interested in what we're doing all the time. But yeah, so development is related to everything. So when we talk about development on Poway Road specifically, it impacts traffic. It impacts our budgets. It impacts everything right now that people are talking about in some fashion. And so it's kind of the central piece of, how we're going to fix the budget for the city council. It's the piece of why we have traffic problems. It's the piece of whether we're talking about height limits, whether we're talking about overdevelopment, why we need new parks. It is that like big middle, piece that everything kind of attaches to. So saying I hear about it for the campaign, yes, everything relates to that. And it's it is the topic, whether or not we want it to be. We talk about the budget, and it's like, well, right now this is the plan, and there are other things that can be done, but yeah. But it is what it is. It's, we have to deal with the budget and problems from that. And so some of that is development. We have to deal with the traffic, and in some ways that's going to be related to development. So yeah, it is the number 1 and 2 and 3 thing on, the issues of, my campaign. So yeah, you can have that.
It's funny how you bring up the budget and development, and they are linked, because when you joined me last May of 2019, you talked a lot about the budget and how expenses were rising at a more aggressive rate than revenues. Yeah. This development that's going in, do you think it's going to make a significant difference in the amount of property tax and sales tax revenue that comes to the city?
So it's difficult to say right now because of the extra COVID effect, I guess you could say. We had plans, the city, not me personally, but the city had plans with certain developments and certain retailers and, you know, a certain amount of commercial space. That may or may not happen. As far as the housing element of it, because it's all mixed use going in,
Yeah.
that's where things get really interesting. You know, some of these are condos and some of them are apartments. So that sales tax piece is kind of fluctuating around, you know, whichever development you're talking about. Because Poway is desirable, I want to believe, yes, those will be filled. I want to believe those will be filled either way. But I also understand that, you know, where they're priced at, except for the affordable housing one next to the Taco Bell, that may not work in the current environment where people are, you know, trying to get back into jobs and, you know, recover from COVID or deal with those aspects. So it was great before where, you know, housing market's hot, and I think it still is. But now it's a little bit of that cautious, you know, is this really the move we want to make? Because it's not, you know, it's not a downsizing move. It's not a save money move. These units for the most part are fairly expensive market rate, you know, and, you know, for a lot of people, what are you getting out of that? You know, a place on Poway Road that's central to Poway. Sure, but is your job in Poway? Are you near transit? You know, enough transit, because Poway's transit doesn't connect to a whole lot of places easily. You know,
pretty weak,
are you near a park for your kids, for your dog, for whatever you have? And what kind of amenities are you getting out of it? So when the discussion comes up, it's, are you getting what you look for in a community out of these new developments, and is that valuable to somebody? I want to say yes, but, you know, it remains to be seen. It should make an impact as long as we can fill the space. So that's the big push, obviously, is fill the space. You know, before it was fill the empty lot. Now it's fill the rooms when they become available. But, you know, there's a lot of extra impacts there that I think we're going to start seeing the problems coming up from. Like Oak Knoll, for example, it's full. It's got parking issues. And so we're going to start seeing those kinds of issues manifest with regard to mixed use, because, you know, a really popular mixed use place might have a restaurant that has just continuous traffic and the residents can't find parking, or the residents all park and then there's nowhere for the people for the commercial to park. You know, that dual edged sword kind of risk there, where, you know, your commercial is affected by your real estate and vice versa, and they both could fail together because parking or something simple like that. So, you know, it's going to be interesting to see. And my biggest kind of issue with the development is it was almost an all or nothing push. You know, we were talking about this a year ago. The Outpost has been around being dug for a little while, but for the most part, we're looking at 3 developments in the last roughly 2 years, with a fourth of, you know, Fairfield's whatever, you know, proposal down the road here, probably pretty soon, I would imagine. The rate that they're talking about it and putting proposals into the city, I see it as, why are we stuffing all of this in almost immediately, you know, within a relatively short period of time, when many times during the discussions for the Poway Road specific plan, they said, hey, this is the 10-year, 20-year plan. You know, we're putting it in like not even a quarter of that time. We're putting it in 2 or 3 years. And the effects of it, obviously, we're talking, you know, 50 plus years before maybe we were looking at demoing in a new development or something like that, right? So we're really shortening the time. And that's kind of had that extra impact of, now we don't know how COVID's going to affect it. We don't know how it's going to look at the end. And those impacts down the road are the ones we can't change. You know, if everyone hates the Outpost, which I don't have many problems with, I have a few, but not many. You know, but everyone hates it. You can't change that. And if that was the you know, kind of the first, you know, guiding principle of building for these new developments, well, now what? You know, now what are we going to do? You know, council's hesitant to change the Poway Road specific plan because they have all of these developments in the works. And my comment to that is, well, you have all of these in the works, and if we have problems with it, that would be the starting point to change. You need to start with the foundation, the Poway Road specific plan. And I get the hesitancy while construction's in progress, but you should have that willingness to say there might be a problem. We don't know everything, and maybe we take some time. We do this as a longer planned process than what I've interpreted, and what I feel is stuff it in 2 years while we don't have a representative that was elected district wide. And that isn't a hit on my opponent. That's simply what has happened, and we don't have a representative. It is a fact of the circumstances. And I really hope that's not the intent of council, but at the same time, it is what we have. And they have the ability to control those kinds of things. They can talk to developers, say, hey, we're looking for this, and unless the proposal's so outrageously good that we have to do it, they should be kind of holding off to kind of get the first one in place and say that's what we want things to look like, or almost like that, but change it a little bit because we got some problems with it, and we don't have any of that in place right now. So it's very interesting and a large, long topic to talk about. Actually, on that note, the city owned most of the Poway Commons land and sold it. Exclusive negotiation agreement. They sold it, and to me that was our one chance where magic wand of money, we had the ability to change things or put something we want in. That was our chance. That was the city's opportunity to build whatever we would want to build, and I get that comes with a cost. But when you look at what we're losing right now, that would have been one of those perfect opportunities to say, hey, we're losing this, the bowling alley, for example. And we know that developers are looking at profit, not entertainment. So we as a community, we as the city, want to make sure that there is some family-centric entertainment venues, whatever that is. We're going to put something there, and then the rest of it can be developed around it. Or we want to make sure we have a park space for all of this new development going in on Poway Road. We want to expand community park, whatever it is. That was the opportunity, and instead it was sold, and now it's the opportunity for I guess that's Sudbury and Meridian. It's a lost chance. Now to me that would have been interesting to see what could we do, and how would that change people's view of it. Because if you have a city stepping in and taking ownership and saying, we said we want to make this a walkable community, we want to make this the centerpiece. Oh, well, we're going to put our money where our mouth is. We're going to actually invest in this, and then still have the development going on around that. It would have been nice to see, or at least entertain those ideas. And well, we didn't. So, yeah. So
it's a really interesting what's going to happen on Poway Road. It's going to be a radical transformation.
Yes.
So, but before I get to my next point, again, I want to welcome all the listeners or the viewers. We will invite you to join us in this conversation on live stream that we're live streaming to Facebook and to YouTube. Just type your comments in or questions in the comment box on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll get them. And already we have one comment that's come in. But before I get to it, I just want to finish my point. It's going to be a radical transformation on Poway Road. And you're right. We don't know how it's going to actually turn out. I think a lot of people are seeing the worst case scenario of Poway Road is going to turn into Mira Mesa. Poway Road is going to be, traffic is going to be worse than it ever has been. It's going to be a nightmare. But there's another, maybe more optimistic version that it could be a more walkable community. Yes. And maybe more of the thorough traffic, when people live on the eastern end of Poway Road, and if they want to get on the 15, maybe that traffic's going to be diverted up to Scripps Poway Parkway or Twin Peaks, and maybe it'll be slow moving traffic on Poway Road, but that's because it's a more walkable area. So I'm very curious to see how it all comes together, because it will be a big change.
Oh yes, I totally agree, and I think that's kind of the hope, is that it's not the worst case scenario, and somewhere in the middle, or maybe best case scenario would be obviously good. But it's that rush to have those developments started almost, that kind of I think is the point of concern, because you can't change it. Well, I mean, they are digging, they're putting rebar in, that's permanent. Yeah. And
The horses
because
left the
there was
barn.
because there was no like, okay, let's let one happen, then tweak, one happen, then tweak. It's been let them all happen all at once, and we'll deal with the traffic, we'll deal with all of it. Let's go. It's kind of that, well, now what are we going to get? Is it the best plans coming forward, or is this being rushed? And that's where I think a lot of that concern generates is, rather than a process that's well thought out, planned over a long period, and then evaluated, using metrics, we're just, let's go. We don't even have metrics. We don't have, the first project isn't even done, but we're building the third, or whatever the case may be. In this case, the third would be technically, we got Villa de Vida, which isn't on Poway Road, but is close. We got the Outpost and we got the Commons on both sides of the road. So the fourth would be Fairfield in the South Poway area. And it's, that's a lot. And it really, that doesn't count, the things on the opposite side of Poway Road. So like the Danes community that's going in right there off, I believe it's Dane Street, which is 7 homes there. That doesn't count the remodeling. So do you know where the United Oil gas station is?
Yeah.
It's just behind that.
Okay. Okay.
So
I didn't know there were new homes going in there. Okay.
Yep, seven new homes. But then there's that. You have the remodel for the United Oil, adding a car wash. You have the Jack in the Box becoming El Pollo Loco. So you have other things happening. Tons of really interesting things happening, but we don't have any of it done. It's all happening all at once, and it's like, well, can we finish one thing, make sure that we're on the right track here before it's all finished and we realize, oh, this is not what we wanted at all. That is a valid concern in my opinion, and one of those metrics that we should kind of really consider and take a look at. So, well,
I agree with you. I think it's going to be interesting to see what comes out the other side, right? When it's all done. And are there, essentially chemistry issues that are going to work really well or really not well? But, the horses have left the barn, so I guess we're going to find out. We've got a comment here from JF Brewer Jr., and he says, or she says, I think it's a he. I think I see the little photo there. So Poway Pomerado Road intersection has commercial buildings that are falling apart and complete eyesores. How do we improve these aesthetics? Like what Poway is doing with the Atlas Shopping Center. South Poway needs some TLC.
Yes. So actually, Poway Pomerado intersection, I don't want to call it the I Love Kickboxing, but that's one of the big ones, and they have the giant sign, so that's what I got in my head right now. I've gone in that building for a few other things, but it's, like I think it was live scans I did there for, schoolwork and volunteer stuff. But overall, that was redeveloped after a fire. And so, not redeveloped, renovated would be a better way of putting it. But yes, I definitely understand those giant shopping centers are like the 70s, 80s style shopping centers. The problem with those and redevelopment right now is a lot of talk during the Poway Road specific plan was, hey, we want new development to come in, and for new development, we will offer all of these amenities. And it was specifically mentioned, I know I mentioned it a few times, hey, what about a current developer saying, hey, I want to redo this, I want to, demo, or I just want to put a fresh coat of paint on and make it look better. And the opinion at the time, and maybe that's changed, and I haven't looked specifically at the plan to verify, but the opinion and what was said was, no, we don't really want just a fresh coat of paint. We want new. We want to kind of get out with the old, in with the new, because the old doesn't fit the community that we have in mind. So the current owners were kind of, shut out from the new Poway in a lot of ways. And so I get that they might not be able to afford it. They might not want to. There's other things on the table that would possibly prevent them. But, the big push was new development gets the bonuses. Old development's kind of, you had your chance, I guess, and we're done with you, which I don't think is really a good way of going about things. Owners of development, when given the same incentives, should be able to or want to improve their property and take advantage of what this new Poway Road plan is going to bring to the table, whether that be new commercial, new residential, or whatever the case may be. So, so yes, while it needs the TLC, you know, the current owners have kind of been restricted in what they can and can't do, at least from the original plans. And I haven't heard of any of them really coming to say, hey, I want to do this with mine, with the exception of the Frizzy Paint Shopping Center. That was where the old bank, I believe it was a Caldwell Bank way back in the day, they were going to redevelop that. And I think that deal's fallen through because the owner of one, the Caldwell Bank part, and the owner of the shopping center can't agree. So you do have these kinds of issues that come up, and that might be the reason. That might be the reason for the push to say, hey, we want new development, because then you don't have different owners disagreeing. And I can see a lot of problems there with current tenants not, you know, selling what they have, and things like that. So it makes sense. But at the same time, I would like to see that our community is vested in our community. They've been here for a long time. They should have that interest. They've already allowed the, you know, the restaurants we know, the places we frequent for our shopping. So why would they not have those interests in mind, and then extra income on top of it with maybe a partnership or something like that? So it seems like a short-sighted move to say, well, no, we need new. And to me, that was kind of a red flag and a concern, based on who has been getting the contracts for new development. But at the end of the day, you know, something needs to be done. I just think we should really see where we're at before we say this is what we want. You know, that is kind of what we're missing right now. So absolutely, we definitely should look at what needs to be done or what can make it better. But are we doing the right thing? You know, let's let the Outpost, which I want to say said early next year at this point. They seem to be going good with their building right now. They got rebar in. They're, I think, above street level now. So let's let them finish and say, okay, this is what we really want, or at least get to the point where we can fully see everything, right? Like, hey, it's, you know, the full 3 stories, and we get to see the height of it. We get to see the amenities that they're supposed to be offering. Is that what we want? Is that the final look of Poway Road if we put that everywhere? So yeah, I think that pause for what, 5 months, 6 months, hopefully, as long as they don't run into delays, would be beneficial, rather than this kind of very focused push on multiple developments everywhere we have open space or land, across the board. That's, you know, not really had the opportunity to say, yes, that meets our our idea, or our vision of Poway Road, right? Because that is where this fear is. The vision is out there supposedly, but nobody knows what it is. You know, we have renderings from artists, we have thoughts, we have comments at council, but we don't have something that we can tangibly go see. We don't. As far as I know, there's no 3-dimensional model we can go. You know, like when you go to a new development, like residential neighborhood, and you say, "Oh, look, this is what our community will look like." That's a community that I would want to live in, because here's the park and here's where I'd live. You know, we don't have that even, and you know, that kind of thing would help to say this is the plan for Poway Road. And I get, you know, we'd be guessing at future developments, but that's the idea, to say, hey, we have this plan, we have this vision, and this is kind of what it looks like. We don't have any of that. And so when people have something they can get behind and look at, cool, we can start, you know, coming together and saying, is this what we all agreed on? Is this the worst case? Is this the best case? Where are we at? And what do we need to change? And then we can really have a conversation. Right now, we're all hypothetical.
But you bring up a good point. I mean, it would be interesting to see like a scaled model of what this Poway Road is going to look like in between Community and Carriage Road, because we've got these, you know, architectural drawings and illustrations, but it would be interesting to see it in true 3-dimensional. Maybe we should get our 4th graders, rather than doing the mission project, they could actually do the Poway Road projection. But it's interesting how, like, when government gets involved with a lot of the city planning and making land use decisions, it's funny how they end up picking winners and losers, right? So certain property owners are winning, other property owners, like the ones at Pomerado and Poway Road, may be losing. So that's where it gets tough, is handling those cases.
Absolutely. And I think it's yes, you have the winners and losers, and some of that's outside the control of the government, because if you don't come to the table, it's hard to really play the game. But at the same time, there's that perception of favoritism, or that perception of like leaning one way or another, like I like this developer over this developer. Whether or not it's true, at the end of the day, something gets approved. Something gets approved.
Sorry
There's
about
Mom.
the interruption.
Hey.
Bye.
So something gets approved, and it is what it is. Ideally, the best plans are coming forward, but to me, there's a lot of concern that doesn't seem to be happening. We're having these long-term, 2 years, I think, for the exclusive negotiation with the Poway owned land before what we have going in there. The Outpost, long process there as well. And so it's kind of this closed door behind the curtain thing. And I don't think that that's necessarily the best way for the community to see that, hey, these are our interests. It's kind of what does the city want? And well, that's what the city said, and that's what we're going to do, right? Not, hey, the community came together and put this together. And, I get the argument can be made. The community could have been involved with the Poway Road specific plan, but it's been pointed out numerous times. People live their lives and don't necessarily want to have to check on government or feel like, oh, I need to go to every meeting to know that my government's doing the right thing. So some people,
they were involved. Wasn't there like a committee that existed?
Well, there was a committee. There was a committee. The committee did the Poway Road specific plan for, I want to say it was 3 years. It was just after my first run, they kind of started getting the committee together. But when you say the community, last few council meetings, a month ago, a little over that, we've had, up to 50 people writing in. I mean, I think over the course of the Poway Road specific plan, we might have had 50 people the entire time. I wasn't on it, but that's the difference there. You have meetings. You talk about the Poway Center for Performing Arts. You have 30 plus people show up on Zoom, in person, whatever the case is. You talk about Poway Road specific plan, a committee where it's not during council meetings, it's kind of off on its own. And you don't have that same engagement, that same level of involvement. Even at the council meetings, it's just a couple people, mostly from the committee, and then me and a couple others there. When you say the community really had a chance, they did. They had a chance. But did they know what was going on? What was at stake? What was being decided? Not really, until this first building, the Outpost hole started getting dug. And then people were like, whoa, hey, my community is changing. And so now it's, oh my gosh, what can we do? Well, it is too late to say we're going to do something there. But when we say the plan should be taking those inputs, I believe that's what we need. People are now aware, and maybe they weren't before. That isn't their fault. You shouldn't be faulting the community because they weren't aware. That meant you were doing a good job at one point, and they didn't have to care, right? So take the kudos that they didn't care about it then. They care now. And they really want to know that you're listening to those concerns. And that's where, as a council, we should say, oh, hey, people are not really, saying everything's peachy and, clouds and rainbows and whatnot. We're really getting some pushback here. Is it valid? Do we need to slow down? Do we need to maybe reevaluate where we're at with the Poway Road specific plan? Those are the kinds of things that we should have council doing. And instead it's, nope, Poway Road specific plan is staying as is. Developments are good. They're almost all within the standards we set. We get to decide because of amenities for some of these to get the extra benefits. And, to me, it's who wins. Is this the council says we have an amenity or the community that says we have an amenity? Because I can guarantee, other than maybe 1 or 2 days for like the first, use of the facility, council's not going to go into a development and say, hey, look at this wonderful amenity for me. They don't live near the amenities that they're deciding. And so it's the community that needs to make those decisions to some level, at least, and say, yes, this is something we need, or yes, this is something valuable to us, because we're giving up traffic, extra stoplights, building height and the views that we have if you drive down Poway Road. We're giving up significant pieces of what make Poway that city in the country, and at the end of the day, do I value the opinion of my community saying, hey, this isn't what I see as an amenity, or do I value the opinion of somebody who's literally never going to go there and use it? I'm going to say the people know. So that's kind of where things are at. But I do see a question I can talk about for sure.
Well, yeah. So let me introduce the question, because we're doing a live stream, so we welcome everyone's input. And if you got a question for Chris, type it into your comments on the Facebook or the YouTube live stream, and we'll share these with Chris. And this is a great question, and it comes from RC Stan, and this is a really hot topic for District 4 for South Poway. And he asks, can we protect Metate Meadows? What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
So Metate Meadows currently has Prop FF protection that allows for the current development based on its zoning. I believe they can put a church or one home on those zones, either one. There's two. There's an 8-acre and there's a 40-ish acre one. Mm-hmm. That's all that could be put there as is right now. So what, 2 homes or 2 really close together churches. That protection won't go away unless, Poway gets challenged for Prop FF, which hopefully we win if we defend it and, go through that process. But that does not mean that we won't have developers coming in like Measure P, which I'm sure we'll talk about, to say, hey, I have a great development plan. I'm going to get this on the ballot and we're going to vote on it. And you guys like my plan. Prop FF goes away. We build. Go. That happened a few years ago with a plan for, I believe it was like 40 homes on 8 acres. And as a community, we said no. They went through the petition process and there was a lot of outcry of, hey, what are you thinking? What are you doing? At the time, many people said, hey, there's these soil issues, there's these problems. And the developer just kept saying, no, that's made up stuff. We can do whatever we want. And now it's interesting hearing from other people and candidates and whatnot saying, there are these issues that we really should consider. And it's, to me, a very amusing thing because, over the few years since that first proposal, things that have happened when they started digging for the outpost. I said, hey, there's water. Tons of people said, hey, there's water. And there was this, whatever. Then they hit water and it was like, oh my gosh, there's so much water you don't understand. And no, we said there was an underground lake like right there. Yeah. But the creek is right behind it. Come on, guys, this is simple stuff. But it's seeing that connection that maybe the community does know what they're talking about when they show up and say, you can't build there, you will get landslides, you will have these issues. Maybe we do know what we're talking about because we know our communities well enough to say this is a problem more than just I don't want development. It's an actual issue. And until you say I can design around it, or I have this wonderful way of dealing with it that is unique and fixes all the problems, until you say that or bring that to the table, we're just like, I don't want that house sliding into my house. Thanks. That's, whatever the case may be. And, seeing the community's voice and opinions and input on this finally be acknowledged, though it took a little while and was kind of ignored during that campaign, is nice. And hopefully down the road stays. People keep saying, hey, there are these issues, and unless you're addressing them, we should not develop there. That would be great. But overall, I think the Prop FF that already protects it is great, and we need to continue to fight for that. And as the first time through when it was getting proposed, I was against it. I was on the side of, Mariana, Chris Cruz, and talking to the community and going against, hey, they are at the store signing, taking petition signatures for whatever paid signatures gather, whatever that was. And we said, hey, here's how you can rescind your signature. Here's how you can fight against this. Here's what we can do as a community. And really, it didn't get past the petition stage because people were really against it. And there was so much community support for keeping it as is. So, at the end of the day, yes, we as a community have great power and voice, but we have to keep active and have to stay on top of things like that. Yes, Prop FF exists, but you can't just say, oh, it's got that and we're good, because they can make ballots initiatives very interestingly worded, and suddenly your yes means a no, or your no means a maybe, or whatever, and you voted it in when you voted no, and you're like, wait, what? Should we not keep the no on? Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So you have to be concerned about those things and keep an eye on it, because those changes can come. They'll just be another item on your ballot. You might not even think it's Poway the way it's worded. Who knows? And then suddenly it's, you vote on a state issue that says, do you want to remove all land protections? You just removed Prop FF. So whether or not it's Poway, whether it's San Diego County, whether it's state issues, we have to be aware of these and, engage with any efforts to kind of remove those protections that we have, because it is protected as is. The only way that we can really solidify the protection that's there would be develop. And I don't mean develop like put 40 homes. I mean, if that one home got built, they'd have to figure out how to subdivide the lot or whatever the case may be. And since I don't want even that one home, and I think they'd have issues even putting one home in. It's kind of that we have to fight the land use ballot initiatives and measures and challenges down the road.
Right. It's interesting how this plays out, because on one hand, it's private property, and you think private property owners should have the ability to build on their own land. But of course, there's zoning laws that prevent them from doing that. And some people think the zoning laws are righteous, and that's what keeps the character of our city. And that was kind of the long-term vision of our founding fathers here in Poway with Prop FF. But on the other hand, sometimes the restriction of development has a lot of unintended consequences, like, kind of being a component of the housing crisis, where there's not enough supply. So, but I do want to take a little bit of a tangent on this Metate Meadows issue and kind of combine it with another issue. So, and I only picked up a little bit of this from the chatter that I saw on Facebook, and I may have my facts wrong. So the guy that owns the Metate Meadows land was the one that was hustling to get the signatures, and that ended up going nowhere. But he lives here in Poway, and was he a rumored person that could potentially be appointed to city council if the mayor ends up winning the supervisor race? Do I have that connection right? Can you help me clear that up?
A little bit here and there.
Okay.
First, what you said though, you said the land use. One of the interesting things with Metate Meadows, the city should have owned that land. And I guess I need to request all of those documents, or if I get on council, I can start going over them. But from my understanding, the original owner, the Nature Conservancy, when they got rid of the land and it went to this kind of auction, which is why we're in the situation we are. The ownership should have transitioned to the city, and the city kind of dropped the ball. So that would be one of those things where, yes, private ownership, do what you want with your land. But this is one of those, we missed the opportunity. We dropped the ball, and that really should have been our land to keep and hold and make open space and add to our, land use and trails and everything else. But what you said, the owner is actually, and I don't remember the name of the actual owner. I believe he lives in San Francisco. So that's the owner of the land. The person you're referring to would be the political consultant driving the signature campaign to have the land rezoned and put the ballot initiative forward. And to answer that question simply, yes, if District 3, I believe, were to become available, or no, District 1. District 1? Yes, Dave Grosh's district. Then, yeah, he could be one of the appointees that would be considered. But it's kind of one of those, rumor mill conspiracy things. And there's a lot of surprisingly odd connections, campaign fundraisers for candidates, bailout of, hey, once Kalen was elected in 2018, there was a proposal council initiated from her to say, let's buy this land from them. And it's like, well, why would you offer to buy land that you should have owned in the first place? You should go back and challenge in the courts for the land you have the right to and fix the glitch, if you will. It's one of those, instead we're just going to buy them out and yay, then everything will be fixed. And it's like, well, now who's really benefiting when you look at who's paying for candidacies, who's paying for campaign fundraisers, who's paying for these things? It becomes a lot more murky and a lot more odd. And then, like you said, with what happens if there's another seat open in an appointment, it's district based, so it'd have to be that district, but that is one of the ones coming up here that could happen. So yeah, absolutely, it's a possibility, and that person is also on our budget review committee currently. So,
Well,
like I said, those connections get really interesting really quickly.
Yeah,
So.
it's like the what do they say? The left bone's connected to the right bone, or whatever. Everything's connected. So let's talk about this city council appointment situation. And I brought this issue up with Kaylin Frank when she was a guest on the podcast. And in the hypothetical that Steve Vaus is successful and wins his race for county supervisor, the mayoral position will be an open seat. And according to Kaylin Frank, her preference is that the mayoral spot would be, solved with an appointment. And she said she wasn't interested at all. So tell me what you think the right process should be if Mayor Vaus wins in November, and what do you actually think will really happen? Because that might be different than what you want.
So what I actually think will happen would be based on the March election. Vaus did not win the March election. And now that we're, top two, because that's how California works for that kind of race, I don't see him making up the amount of ground that he was behind by, but that is possible, right? Anything's possible. He's been putting in the work. It's possible. So based on past precedent, I'd say it's not as likely, but it's still in the realm of possibility. So from there, if we go with it doesn't happen, okay, it's that conspiracy of what could be, right?
No harm, no foul. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But nothing happened, so we're good.
Right.
Okay, fine. If it does happen, I think that the best case, the way forward for Poway, is not to do an appointment. That just point blank, have an election. Now, as part of that, council would be probably running for a seat on, the mayor spot. Some of them, at least. And so that would possibly mean another seat available. It's my opinion that we should just not have an appointment if possible. And I get there's monetary concerns here, but here's an interesting take on that. On June 16th this year, the farms was put on the ballot. The city put it on there because, they all agreed, and that's one of the ways to get a ballot initiative on there was by council action for a Prop FF vote. The other way is a petition. So when that happened, staff went to the registrar of voters. They said, hey, we're talking about a citywide initiative. We want to know the cost. They were quoted $97,000 for 2 district races and Prop FF vote. Both, all 3. So if you look at that, that'd be at-large mayoral seat and 2 district seats. Now I get it's a standard election time frame, so there's a lot of negotiated costs that get reduced because other cities are having their elections, so you can combine the work. But when you look at that, under $100,000 for 3 races, you could almost go to a factor of 10 before you're hitting $1 million. Like that's an excessive factor realistically, but we're talking about 2 races here, possibly mayor and council seat.
Kaylin Frank said it was going to be about $800,000, if I remember.
And that would be that 10x factor, right?
Yeah, but that would be a standalone election,
Yes, as a standalone election, exactly. Yeah. And so when you look at that, is that possible? Does that make sense? I have a feeling that the concern over cost is the kind of boogeyman of this. There's a lot of those that have come up recently that have been talked about, and it's that here's the fear, and because that fear exists, we're not even going to look at that because it could happen, and then it could be more expensive. Oh, well, all right, way to make the boogeyman worse, right? How about we get a true cost? And the real problem here is they've done appointments for every vacancy over the last, 6+ years. Going back even further than that, and they haven't had a special election other than, I think, going back to the Betty Rexford recall, they haven't had a special election.
No, yeah,
So
right.
when you look at that, of course we have no idea what the costs are. And when you consider the limited time window that you have to decide these things, they don't even want to ask the question during that window. They have 60 days to, go through this process and appoint if they're going to do an appointment. They don't even take the full 60 days. They appoint in less than a month in most cases, and special meetings for it to make sure that they meet the deadline. But you have that time window because you could request those costs and determine if that's the best way forward. And having an election actually extends those windows a little bit to say that you have now the election has to be held on this day by this. But you have to make the decision to appoint or hold the special election within those 60 days. You make the decision if you're going to appoint, then I think it's almost the same time window. If you're going to have the special election, it extends the window. And rather than go through a slow, calculated, well thought out process, it seems rushed every time. We're going to appoint, done, moving on. And I don't think that's the right answer. I fought against appointments going back to 2014 when Vaus won his mayoral seat against Don Higginson. He vacated his council seat. I was the only other candidate. I received 3,000 some odd votes, which is more than some candidates that have won elections in the past. And they said, well, you lost, so we don't even consider you a candidate. We're going to look at these other, it was 24 candidates at the time that put in for the appointment. And that's when Barry Leonard was appointed for 2 years.
Right.
So, I get that kind of mindset. Oh, you lost, so why would we appoint you? But at the same time, anybody that runs a candidacy for council comes to a certain understanding that you're very vested. And Mr. Leonard found out very, very the hard way, through experience, if running a campaign versus being appointed to a seat is a night and day difference. It's almost, I would say, more work for a campaign than it is day to day on council. I mean, if it was this much work every day for council, they wouldn't be saying, oh, it's 10 to 20 hours or 30 hours a week. It'd be, for a campaign, it's literally, I get a text message every few minutes. I get Facebook messages, posts on top of doing, all of the normal flyers and meeting people. And it's a very involved process. I asked my wife, she's the other half of that, answering on pages I'm not on, to say, hey, here's what this is, or, hey, reach out to here. So it's a very involved process. But when you're on council, it's what are the current issues and when are they next coming up to talk about? It isn't what everything's on the table. It's, look, we're only dealing with this right now. I understand your concern. I'll note it when we start talking about that. I'll put it to staff. We'll deal with this in the right manner or get the right people on it. But when you're a candidate, it's like you have to have the answer for everything. You need to know all the details for everything. And it's a lot different than council where you're like, well, look, there's 4 other people here next to me. Together, we're going to come to a decision, and your input is a big part of that, hopefully. But my answer on council and my answer as a candidate, they should match. The difference is what happens. As a candidate, it's that the best case scenario is what's going to happen. That's always the perception, right? So I say, we're never going to have another development on Poway Road. That's not possible.
Right.
So, but if I were to say that, people would be like, oh, yeah, that's wonderful. We'll never develop Poway Road ever again. Cool. Well, what about in 10 years if I'm not on council? They'll develop Poway Road. Even if I'm on council, there are 4 votes and then poof, development happens, right? So it's that thought that you have all the answers and your vision is the best case scenario, whether or not it is. Versus when you're on council, it's, okay, look, council has to make these votes. These votes are what bind us. These are the city's decision. So at the end of the day, your voting record is what really reflects. And you say, look, at least I can stand on my voting record. I voted that down, but they didn't. So we have another development. Sorry. So, it's that big difference. And I think that distinction as individuals in the city or running for an appointment, if you've never run a campaign, you don't really get that level of involvement or that detail or that, that work involvement and skin in the game. And it was funny to watch in 2016 when he had gone through the last 2 years to say, hey, we got a sign ordinance we put in place, we got all these wonderful things, and he's like, well, that sign ordinance sucks. Like, yeah, funny story about that. You put it in and you don't even know what you put in and how it's going to impact you. I did, but I ran before. So walking neighborhoods. Yeah, it's not just walking to the council meeting and arguing your case. You're walking miles and miles to hang door hangers, talk to people. It's so different. And so to me, a person that runs a campaign is a more vetted person than just somebody showing up because there's a seat open. And at the end of the day, I think that extra vetting from community involvement, from what the community has said, asked, forums, gives a better perspective than just a council meeting or two to say, oh, you gave a 2-minute speech. I agree. You're on council, done. Right. So if ever there is an appointment, I would be looking at people that have run before or just ran before I'd consider the random, hey, I've got a great resume on paper and I just moved here or whatever the case may be. That's my perspective. But I don't like appointments. I think that they are disingenuous. They remove the constitutional, representation we have to say, you vote for your representative. And the argument they make to say, well, you voted for us, so we're going to vote for them, is completely disingenuous. A 4-1 vote is dynamically different than a 5-0 vote because it shows that the community had a say, or that person at least had a say to say, this isn't necessarily a unanimous decision. I agree with community members that we don't want this, or we should change, or we should look at something else. And at the end of the day, when you start adding those up over the last 6 years, we've had how many 5-0 votes? I'd say 90 to 95%. Right. And 4-1 votes, a couple here and there, but, not very many. And then, 3-2 votes, like I think we're at 3 now in the last 6 years. So it's not, the position on council doesn't seem to have much, unique thought to say, I want something different. It's almost always unanimous. And so when you say, oh, well, we'll let the people that decide unanimously represent us to decide unanimously for the person that will help us decide unanimously, of course, it's going to be somebody that votes the same way because that's what they want. They want to continue that trend. It makes sense. It makes their job easier. Whereas if you have somebody who says, maybe we think about things differently, maybe we look at this from a different perspective, maybe you take some background from, different life perspectives. And to be honest, Kaylin brings some of that to the table. She definitely has a lot of those to bring. But a lot of younger people, like you said, younger people with kids involved in the community have that. It's because we are now going to be the ones that are the future of Poway, one way or the other, whether we're all of the residents because, one day that just cycle happens as the generations change, or because we also have, a spot on council or, whatever the case may be. At some point, the future is your younger generations, and then they get older and then it cycles through. So getting that perspective earlier rather than, hey, you left us with Poway Road that is like, 10 stories and no parking and 17 stoplights. We don't really like this, but we can't do anything for another few years. This isn't great. So I think appointments are our last resort. If we have to do an appointment, in other words, if I'm like fighting against it and it's going to be a 4-1 vote anyway, my real big push is candidates that have run before so that the community has had a say in who they are and knows about them. And they're not just literally a new person. Every time they've had an appointment, it's 15 to 20 people. I'm not, that's not a knock on Kaylin. Every time it's happened, and it's like, who in the heck are these people over here? I've never heard this name before in my life, and I've been at almost every council meeting for the last 6 years. Oh, all right. So, it's more of a, people see that it could be an easy seat, and maybe they can make a difference, rather than the run a campaign, which is a whole lot more work. And, finding that out is a unique perspective. But I think when we look at it, if we have to, that's the first step, somebody that's done this before, so we get that. And then the second step is, hey, how long are they going to be in that seat? If we're talking 10 council meetings before the actual required election, why are we appointing? Like, that is way outside the scope of what we should be doing. The community is going to vote one way or the other. We're literally giving somebody a head start, essentially. That's exactly right. That's what's happening. Now, if it's a year, maybe. If we get to 2 years, other than, like I said, when we know something's happening, like with Vaus, we know this is coming. This isn't like a mystery. It could happen. We should plan for the election process to follow. if it's God forbid something happens to a council person after an election, in that window of 2 years to a year and a half, then okay, fine, we start looking at an appointment. And that's because it's a long-term issue that maybe we don't have people running for whatever reason. Maybe we can appoint because it's a longer term and they'll have time to say, get their feet wet or whatever. But when you look at these, I almost always favor an election over an appointment.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I think as a voter, if you've got to do an appointment, okay. But then when they do a second appointment, you start wondering what's going on here. And then a third appointment, you begin to maybe question, do they have the public trust?
Yes.
Are they running a fiefdom, or are they actually going out and getting the will of the people? And really, city council members, especially now that we have districts, are representatives. So yeah, I'm also with you. I think they have to do an election. And even if it costs a lot of money, because to me, this is a huge priority if that were to be the case. But like you said, maybe Vaus doesn't win. We don't know. I mean, we'll find out. He just got the endorsement from the UT. So I'm very curious. It's a fascinating race, because the Republican Party, are endorsed Anderson, and Vaus has got all these other endorsements. So it's going to be crazy. Now, we got some more questions, and we got one from Phil. And Phil, I want you to hang on. We're going to get to Phil's question, but I want to finish up what we're talking about with this whole appointment scenario. And we're going to go to Pete Neild, and he says D4 and D3 is up right now on the same ballot. Actually D4 and D2, I think, right?
Yes.
Okay. And where the mayor's position may be vacated. Hence, if the mayor leaves, more pressure on the vote of 4, with the potential of the 2 new people. So in other words, what if nothing gets done with a 2-2 vote? Can you imagine that?
So this is the typical boogeyman. Like I said, boogeyman. There are a few of them out there.
Yeah.
There's the cost, and then there's we'll tie things up with the 2-2 vote. I already kind of commented on this. How many split votes have we had? We've had 3 3-2 votes.
Very few.
Yeah. If the 2 person is the one that's out, it's a 3-1 vote. If the 3 side's out, then it's a 2-2 vote. We've had 3 of those in the last 6 years. So I'm not real concerned.
Was on the board, right?
Yeah, I'm not real concerned about that. Even 4-1 vote, then it'd be 4-0 or 3-1, right? Like, the odds of it aren't significant. And then you have to look at the council job. I hate to say this. It's the least favorable thing for a candidate, and it's the thing that nobody really wants to talk about. But council's job, about 90% of the time, is stuff nobody cares about, nobody wants to think about, and almost everybody agrees on.
Right.
It's daily maintenance stuff. Hey, are we writing our checks to pay for the bills that we have, to get our roads done, to get the new truck, to whatever the case may be? That is about 90% of the job. Are we going to have a split vote on that? Almost never. I don't even see 4-1 votes on that, because it's day-to-day things. When you get to these bigger issues, how frequently they come up, I'd say we have a lot more recently, but in a general normal scenario where we're not developing Poway Road, probably 3 to 5 a year. In the last year, 2019, I think we had 7 or 8 maybe. So having the issue is the first part. You have to have something big enough that now we're going to have a split decision. The community is going to get involved and people are going to care. Then you have to have the council be swayed enough to not vote unanimously. Then it has to affect at least 2 to 3 of them. So we're talking multiple layers down here. And again, appointment, that's a limited window. We're talking 60 days. So all of 6 meetings? No, 4 meetings. 4 meetings for an appointment. For a special election, maybe add 2 to 4 more meetings. So up to 8 meetings where this could happen. You may have potentially 1 vote in those 8 meetings that would be in that 3-2 possible category And again, it'd have to be that 3 that's the one that, and a no decision doesn't mean, oh, we don't do anything. It means we'll have to have a vote on it later and nothing happens right now.
There's a better chance you're going to be hit by lightning than that's going to happen.
Exactly. So it's a false boogeyman. I'm more concerned about the cost, to be fair, than I am about a 2-2 vote. It's just not realistic. And, when they throw things out there like that, it's like, well, yeah, that's a possibility. Sure, and a plane can crash into me tomorrow while I'm crossing the street and looks both ways. It's 2020. Anything could happen.
Right.
But it's those things that when they get thrown out there as like, this, hey, that could happen, and nobody says anything about it, that drive me nuts about council stuff and campaigns, because there's so many of them, and you're like, okay, yes, that is possible, but completely unrealistic. And nobody ever calls it. It's just, yeah, whatever. And, people that have done the research or looked at it go, that's ridiculous. I don't even want to give it my time. And people that don't know think it's the biggest thing ever. And you have to sit there and be in the middle and say, look, I've looked at it. It's not an issue for these reasons. And it's, we just spent, 10 minutes talking about something that is a non-issue in 99.99% of cases. So it is what it is. But I'm, like I said, more concerned with cost than I am with a 2-2 vote that, we could say, all right, we voted 2-2. Can we all vote unanimously to bring this issue back after we get a 3rd or a 5th member on our council? Cool. Moving on. Or if it's council meetings have had this happen a few times. They try to get the unanimous vote. There's the one person who's die hard, I'm against this, and they spend 10, 15, 20 minutes talking the issue out to try to get that unanimous decision. And I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with when, they just vote unanimously and there's no discussion. But
like Dave Brush. We talked about that.
Yeah. When they do that, they should see, hey, it's 2-2 split. A good example of this, Barry Leonard's appointment. They were 2-2 split on Barry Leonard and Karen Dunn. And, it would have been 2-2. Like, we either aren't going to appoint because we're going to vote 2-2 or we're going to have to figure this out. Not for an appointment, but for a regular council item like development or things like that that need a decision. It should be one of those, all right, we aren't deciding here. Can we all agree to shelf this to a later meeting? How far out can we push it? Let's start having those talks so that we don't have a 2-2 vote. That would be the way to address it, I think, if we ran into that problem on council. But again, 2-2 votes, we have a better chance of having snow this year than we do of a 2-2 vote, honestly.
Snow in Poway. So this is let's move on. I mean, we've kind of beaten the dead horse on this one. So I want to go back to Phil's question because he was kind enough to post it. And this goes back to the comment you made earlier about, does the community really have input on some of our planning decisions on Poway Road, et cetera? And Phil Factor, another candidate for election here in Poway, he has this idea for a planning commission that would get all kinds of citizens, I guess, on a committee. Maybe it's a large committee that would have a lot of input and recommendations on the planning decisions for the city. What are your thoughts on that idea? Do you think it's enough to be representative of the community? Would it be effective? What do you think?
So this is a very interesting topic. When you hear council talk about development in Poway, they talk about it from the perspective of, we are almost built out. That's across the board. The number one thing that gets said is there's very few spots left to develop. There's very little left to do other than demo what exists and rebuild. We don't really have that much development left. That's their statements. Multiple
times. Pretty much true, isn't it?
I mean, it is. And when we look at that and take that into account, saying we need a committee dedicated to more development or the development that's coming in, it's more of a, we need a community that's dedicated to Poway's values and Poway's spirit, if you want to use a good word, the community feel and what we value as a city. The community input would be there rather than development that should be winding down, should be done. It should be more of a, hey, this guy hasn't renovated or put a facelift on his place in 30 years. Can we get some action on that? Is there something we can kind of do there? Are we missing something? Does he need something? What's the, way that we can get Poway to be the best it can be? But to say, hey, we need to plan for more development, I think is, unless Sacramento gets crazy, is kind of inviting that development into Poway. And I would prefer that development is very tentative and not, invited and welcomed process to everywhere gets developed. Everywhere gets a 4-story building or whatever the case may be. So I do believe a committee or a commission or, group of people, kind of like Parks and Rec, where you meet as needed, would be a beneficial thing. What I would like to see is a proportionate representation there, though. Where is 99% of the development in Poway going to happen? Well, we have the Poway Road specific plan for a reason. So, do we want to have it where every district gets one person, and then just like on council, every district gets one person and South Poway has one person? Okay, so I have 1 vote to 4 votes, and we have no real voice to say this is wrong. What we do, we just get a 4-1 vote. Or do we say the people that are affected by this, those that live right there, so District 2 and 3, maybe, District 3 and 1, they each get 2 people. District 4, you get 3 to 4 people. District 2, for the most part, has no real major commercial development. We have a couple residential developments going on, but maybe it's 1 or 2 people for that. Proportionate representation to say, hey, this impacts Poway Road. Well, District 1 and 3 are impacted heavily by that. District 4, very impacted by that. You guys get a lot of the say. District 1, yes, your opinion is valuable. You come shop down here, or you go to RB, I guess. So it's valuable, but it doesn't hold that same weight. You're not driving Poway Road every day to go to your job, unless you work on Poway Road, I guess. Like me, for example, I drive it 2 to 3 times a day or more, depending on what's going on. Sometimes as many as 10 times if I'm going to pick up a dog, pick up my son, baby has to go visit somebody, campaign stuff, and work. I'm on Poway Road constantly. That's just not realistic for somebody living in North Poway. As much as, there's not a north-south divide, there is when you look at the general plan and it says that. And that divide really comes down to, do you use Poway Road as your main method of transportation? If you answer no, you probably are not in South Poway. If you answer yes, you most likely are in South Poway. If you answer maybe, then you're in that gray area where we got to figure out where the line goes, and you're right on the line. It's maybe a big line, And to me, that's what defines the communities. You have Poway Road is your main way in and out, and you either try to go to Scripps Poway Parkway because it's crazy, or you go to Twin Peaks because traffic, right? Or you just have no need for Poway Road because you go out on Espola, or you go out to Twin Peaks, and going all the way down to Poway Road just doesn't make sense. There's obviously those people that are that weird, unique group that use Poway Road to go out to the 67, right? That's not.
I do that.
Yeah, exactly. That's not a bad thing, but it kind of bypasses that problem of why Poway Road would be bad. You go out to the 67. Now, that's not to say there isn't traffic out that way sometimes, especially if they're doing like work on the grade. But, most of the time it's traffic related to work, not traffic related to major construction, stoplights, school getting out, or whatever else. So it's those 2 times of the day, and it's almost predictable. Whereas right now, you drive down Poway Road, you can roll the dice, and what does it say? Oh, traffic today. Maybe not. Who knows?
Here's an interesting question. So, I used to live on Garden Road, but I lived there for 11 years. And on Sycamore, was it Canyon Road or Sycamore Creek Road, that there's like a horse stable there, and it goes up into these ranch areas, and it connects to Scripps Poway Parkway. There's an off ramp, but it's locked and
it's
closed.
A fire escape. Yes.
Yeah, fire escape. Would you support opening that up to general traffic so the Garden Road people could get to the 15 more quickly than going down Poway Road?
So I don't think that actually helps the majority of Garden Road where it's located, because you'd be driving back into Garden Road, then down, and then up onto Scripps Poway Parkway. about the same distance based on speed limits, residential community, to go out Garden Road community up to Scripps Poway Parkway. The concern for me is we would be diverting people from Scripps Poway Parkway freeway. Like, I mean, speed limit is 55, 60 into residential. And that isn't going to be just, hey, you have to have Garden Road, on your driver's license. That's open for anybody if we actually make it an on-ramp. And that would be a lot of traffic going down right into main residential community, the school right there. And we kind of have a problem in some ways, I guess. If you go, Garden Road. Garden Road is very straight, except for a little tiny wobble, but for the most part, just a straight shot. No speed bumps, nothing. And for the school area, we have a crossing guard to go from a dirt lot across the street to the school, whether that be leaving school or going to school. So we'd be looking at morning times or afternoon times when kids could be coming to and going from school, diverting traffic from the fast lane essentially down to residential or vice versa. We already have enough problems watching some people not listen to the stops when it says, hey, there's people crossing. Like, they try to get through there, I'm the last car, I can go through, and kids almost getting hit. We haven't had any accidents, but that to me is far bigger concern, that I don't want that. And we could take steps to mitigate that and then maybe bring that back to the table. But until those are done, I see that as a bigger risk to our community than I do the value of a faster connection possibly to Scripps Poway Parkway. So if we had, for me, we put in a table speed bump that also acts as the crosswalk there for Garden Road, just that one. And it's kind of like the ones on Carriage, where they're those big table long ones.
It's already been installed?
No, we don't have one. We have nothing.
Yeah, okay.
So if one of those was put in, maybe some flashing lights, the whole 9 yards to really make it good. And then we have our added extra, crossing guard and help there. That helps the school be safer. That might make the added traffic from Scripps Poway Parkway not as much of a concern. But again, I'd have to see, that kind of investment to the Garden Road to make it valuable for me to go, hey, yeah, let's just go into the community more, to go up to Scripps Poway Parkway to go. And now you're going to Costco or Home Depot. Whew, that would be great. Right where it's at, it'd be perfect. Yeah. But going to work, which most of us would be doing, Scripps Poway Parkway back up on that side, you'd be driving down further on Scripps Poway Parkway. You'd, not necessarily
hit all the lights anyways, right?
Yeah, you hit all exactly. You'd gain a minute maybe or so, and if you hit all the lights, you gain nothing or less.
Well, the whole idea of a speed bump on Garden Road in front of the school sounds good, but I know that is really hard to get accomplished, because now I live off of Stone Canyon. And the people here have always been, freaking out about traffic. And there's quite a bit of no on P people here because they're concerned about the traffic overflow. And many years ago, well, not many, like about 5-6 years ago, they tried to get the city to put in speed bumps, and the city wouldn't do it. So good luck with that.
Well, and I think the reason, the majority of the reason I heard on that was related to emergency vehicles. There are significant ways to address the emergency vehicle boogeyman.
Boogeymans.
It is. But, the speed bumps can be designed around emergency vehicles. That's one way. And then as opposed to doing the shelf, there's what they call traffic pinches, where the sidewalks come out. It's still easy enough to drive through, but you feel like you're more close, so you slow down more. There's all kinds of staggered speed bumps. So one side's one way and one side's the other, and they're like offset. Offset. So that way they can do the S kind of drive through for emergency vehicles. There's a ton of ways around it. And they just throw the emergency vehicles don't like it, so no. And I mean, come on, we're talking about engineering landslide areas, and they won't let an emergency vehicle. I think we can engineer this, guys. I think we got this.
Well, we could go forever on this. Our last podcast was over 3 hours.
It was.
So I'm prepared to keep going. I love this conversation, and hopefully a lot of our viewers and listeners are going to enjoy this. And again, we're live streaming, so we welcome your questions and comments. Just type them into the Facebook or YouTube comments. It pop up on the screen here for Chris and I, and we can ask, relay your questions to Chris. Or if you just want to chime in, or you want to tell me that I'm full of it, you can do that too. So I want to just radically shift gears into something else. And we all got this in the mail, right? This is our sample ballot, and I imagine a lot of people are already voting, right? I mean, I think a lot of people have been voting now because they're concerned about the mail system and everything else. But what I did a whole podcast on the propositions in California, and I'm not going to go through the list and ask you how you feel on every single one of them. But is there any like one proposition that's on the ballot that really sort of lit your fire, like yes or no, and which one was it?
Well, so I normally am the vote on the day of voter.
Oh yeah, me too.
I wait and hear everything all the way up until, because not that some last minute gaffe is going to change my mind, but I think that voting early isn't bad, but you miss the perspective of that one last debate, that one last comment, that one last meeting, because we have another council meeting, right?
You missed one last Access Hollywood bus.
yeah, exactly. So you miss those kinds of things that maybe do change your mind, and you go, oh man, But the other reason is because what I've seen with propositions is, advertising shifts as they go on, and it gets more and more ridiculous in a lot of cases and overwhelming. But what I do is I do my own research on them, usually later. Once I've seen enough ads, I can go, okay, the no ads are always going to be this way, the yes ads are always going to be this way. But I take that into perspective when I do my research, and I actually wrote a thing on Facebook about this because I think it was, I want to say 22, the Uber one.
Yeah.
So I've actually looked at that one. I've looked at a couple other ones here and there, but I haven't I know everything about this one. I'm definitive going to be this way. I haven't. I just know generally probably where I'll fall and look at the supporting documents to say yes or no. For 22, though, it was really interesting. You see both sides of it, what people are saying about it, the advertising for it, and then you start looking at what it actually has and what it says. And it's all over the place. So people that are like, yes, it's like, okay, most of them, and I'm sure I'm going to offend somebody with this, but most of them aren't the affected people. Most of them are not doing rideshare. They are not that's going to help me. They're that's going to help them kind of people.
Right.
And it's kind of odd to see the support for a different group that you're trying to champion, and maybe you don't necessarily know that that's helping them, right? That might not help them in this case. So then you see a lot of no's, and they're like, no, they deserve rights, and those companies are horrible, and they deserve to pay them better or whatever. And you're like, is that really what's happening here? Kind of where are things at? So I looked at it, and, the yeses are always like, hey, this will help. It'll keep rideshare in California, which, yes, that is a concern, rideshare leaving California, because if this doesn't pass, then maybe Uber and Lyft and all of them can't operate here. And so, I have a feeling something will appear in that vacuum, but, there is that concern. Then there's what that impacts when you're talking about workers' rights, when you're talking about overtime, when you're talking about pay, when you're talking about all of that stuff. Well, it is this kind of new dynamic, classification to say, we'll give you some of this stuff, but there's this big tag attached to it that says you must meet these criteria in order to get that stuff. And, the more you look at it, you're like, well, is that a reasonable set of criteria? Is that something that happens regularly, or does that exclude the majority of the, gig economy that's using this? And, the more I look at it, the more I feel it's kind of the exclusive to, hey, I'm just doing this as a little side thing. I don't get anything out of it because I have my regular job, which, again, maybe the regular job covers it so they don't need it. But then there's those that this is almost their job primary and their way of making money. And maybe they do it across multiple platforms, and the cohabitating or the commingling ones like DoorDash with Uber or Uber Eats with Uber, so, you look on their car and there's like 17 different logos and you're like, oh, all right. So there are those people who are making a living off of this, but because it has to be, this pickup was Lyft, this pickup was Uber, this was a DoorDash, this was a, whatever the delivery one is for groceries. I can't think of it off the top of my head. Whatever those are, they jump between them. So they're only working maybe 2 or 3 hours on this one, then 2 or 3 hours on this one. And across all of them, they get nothing. They don't get those benefits because they didn't meet the hours criteria or they didn't meet whatever. And then you look at it a little bit deeper and it says, oh, time spent waiting doesn't count. So for all of them, they'll jump between this one to this one because there wasn't an available ride soon enough or, whatever. You start looking, you're like, well, that time to jump between platforms doesn't count for them. The time here doesn't count for them. And there's all these restrictions. You're like, so does it really help them? Because most of them are across multiple platforms, and that hinders them unless they literally dedicate themselves to a single platform. So after looking at it and seeing that, it's kind of like, okay, Uber benefits if you're, Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash and everything else because you're across multiple platforms. They don't benefit and they have to pay you and have to support you if you're just exclusive to them. But then, hey, they have an exclusive employee, at that point. And then you look at the funding for this. It's like $50 million or something like that. And it's literally Uber, Lyft, DoorDash. It's the 5 of them and nothing else. I think there's like a $250 donation. Their top 10 is 6 donations. And 5 of them are the delivery service or, Uber type companies. And then 1 is just some guy that gave them money, I guess. And then you look at the no side and it's everybody else, whether that be unions, whether that be gig economy workers, whether that be, councils. And it's crazy to see that because there's this perception that, oh, you're helping the person. Well, if you're helping an employee of Uber or DoorDash or whatever, to get their benefits, right? To really stick it to the company because they'd owe them. I'm pretty sure Uber wouldn't be putting $50 million into it to take a piece out of my pie, right? They have the vested interest that for this to succeed, to not only keep California as a place that they can operate, but also not have to pay those that don't meet this exclusive criteria that they almost entirely devised on their own that I would bet excludes 80, 90, 95%. I mean, I don't know the number, but I would expect based on their standard calculation, what they said, which doesn't go into the details, that it's excluding the majority of the employees that, define themselves as an Uber employee or a Lyft employee, just because they have multiple platforms they support. So when you look at it at the end of the day, it's like, yes, seems good, but no, really holds their feet to the fire to say, no, you can't just treat them as dispendable, multi-supporting employees. You have to give them the credit for what they do for you as that, 3-hour shift or whatever, and give them the benefits related to that. And,
so you're going to be you're a no on 22. Then
I am a no on 22 because of that funding. When you look at it at the end of the day, who benefits? You don't spend $50 million on something as a company that isn't going to benefit you. And I have a feeling they save a significant amount in the benefits, in the write-offs and everything else that is being offset by this little, I guess you could concession that they say, hey, we'll give these people this small percentage here that actually work X number of hours. I think it's like 30 hours a week. We'll give them some benefits, but not even full benefits. It's this reduced, exclusive, classified version of an employee that isn't an employee. So, my concern with it is upfront that, and then how does that translate into other jobs? Can you start saying people who work hourly across the board, like Taco Bell, like McDonald's, like Walmart, whatever, can we now start reducing what they count as employees to this new classified, whatever Uber created that is, hey, if they don't work 30 hours, and we kind of have in some ways, but that is the concern, is that this has more of a far-reaching impact. And, sure, it went from independent contractor to classified employee to whatever this will make. I worry about it impacting other businesses and essentially turning our hourly employees, which in a lot of cases are the essential workers we're literally relying on during the pandemic, into, this, how can we cut that down to make it so we don't have to pay them more so that the CEO can get another $2 million bonus? That's what I see it as. And, maybe that's down the road a little bit more, but everyone's always talking about, what is it, Prop 15, how that'll turn into Prop 13 and take away all of our taxes or whatever. There's these slippery slopes. And yes, some of them are really valid. Some of them are also ridiculous, but some of them are absolutely valid. And when you talk about reclassifying or creating a new class of employee, that is very relevant for all employees everywhere, whether you're salary or hourly, because that's saying, hey, what we had before was salary and hourly, and then independent contractor that kind of set their own hours. Now we're making another one, a fourth one that's in between independent contractor and hourly, but doesn't really get the company benefits. It's like, well, what is that? And how many people can we shift to that? That starts becoming the real concern. And I hope people are aware of those things. And, I hope maybe we don't see that, but I think it's a risk that I'm not willing to take. And, I see the people supporting and against, and just have to say, look at the bottom line. Who's really benefiting from a yes? Who's really benefiting from a no? And at the end of the day, what does that mean for California? What does that mean for you?
It's funny because our votes are going to offset on that one. Now, I don't want to turn this into a debate on Prop 22 because I want to make this about you and your candidate.
Oh, no, that's fine.
No, but still, I'm trying to respect the audience as well, because I make my living as an independent contractor.
You do.
And consulting. And so I tend to, and I'm much more of a free market kind of guy. So I very much am supportive of 22. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen. Normally in the state of California, these kinds of things go in the favor of the worker. That's usually how the votes turn out. I haven't seen any polling on this. I'm curious to see how it's leaning. But it's a fascinating topic, I think.
Yeah.
But anyways, let's move on, because again, I don't want to make this about me. I want to make this about you. Okay, because you're the guest, right? So,
hey.
Okay, so I saw a picture of you and your family over at the Hop Stop in Poway. How'd you like that place?
Been there a few times. It's great. We were there day after they opened. And yeah, it's fantastic. We talked to the owner a few times. We actually have our because they have that outdoor area. They really embrace the whole pandemic eat out, I guess, kind of thing. So they have that outdoor eating area, and what we've recently shifted the PTA, which I'm on, to, is this outdoor meeting. So now we can meet outdoors. We can also eat, and so the president will bring his computer, and we'll be able to zoom in, and if they can't meet, or you're on the move, or you don't want to meet because of concerns, perfect. You can still Zoom, but we can all meet. We can have a meal. We can do what we need to do. So it's great for that, and they're helping us with that. They're accommodating, setting aside a nice area off on in a corner, so we don't disturb people. And then on top of that, just when we've gone before, they have it set up really well. They keep adding to it, so I keep seeing better and better things. The scanned QR codes for the menus. So now you don't have menus that are transitioning hands and possibly a concern there. You just scan it on your phone. You have it on your phone. They have the tab that they set up, so you go in, you set up your tab, and go throughout the night, and you can close out your tab. And if you forget to close out your tab, then they will charge you premium on that. But they can do that, and it because it's so easy to walk in and walk out. It's not I forgot to pay. It's, well, I'm paying a little extra. But you don't have to drive back and take care of that. They will close out your tab. That didn't happen to us, but it's they've set it up to be so convenient to go in and out, and it's dog friendly. It's everything that you could think of to make it as inclusive for families, for pets, for everything. And it's a good time. I really enjoy what they have set up there.
It's a nice shopping center, and I've been to Smokin' Jay's Barbecue. That's really good, and then we often go to the Bark Collar, I think is what it's called. And so those people there are really cool, but I haven't been to the Hop Stop. I'm looking forward to that. Kevin Kennedy chimes in. He says tuning. I don't know what he means by that. Anyways,
I think it's District 4 tuning in.
okay, yeah, he's tuning in. So again, we welcome your comments and questions here on the live stream. Feel free to share. But like, let's talk just briefly about in South Poway. Are there some new restaurants or new stores that you and your family have been enjoying in District 4?
So, not really new.
Yeah.
A lot of things are kind of built already, and that's the sad thing. You have the north of Poway Road and then right south of Poway Road. So north of Poway Road, there's a couple new-ish ones, and then there's south of Poway Road where District 4 is.
Right.
So that line is, but there are new restaurants, personal ones. I mean, this goes back to actually a question at one of the forums where they asked about smoke-free environments and things like that. I didn't know that certain restaurants had already done that, and I didn't know that Poway didn't already have something in place for that, given now we've shifted to this outdoor environment. But it's actually nice to see restaurants that I've frequented. So one of them for pizza, I usually go to Coney Island Pizza. Hi, Christina, if you're watching. And they're fantastic. I can't recommend them enough. That's one of our go-tos if we're having pizza. It's also on my way in, so it's nice to be able to stop, get the pizza, and continue. The sushi place right next to there, we've frequented a number of times. We haven't been since the pandemic. But we've gone to a lot of places, almost everywhere in the South, District 4 area, almost every restaurant. But there's a few that we continuously frequent. Outside of District 4, though, we still have our favorites, like Taco we're at, and frequently there. Smokin' Jay's, like you said. Old Poway just is a wealth of wonderful places, new and old, that are, generally family friendly, and that's awesome. It's really nice to have that in the community. Even if you're driving to Old Poway, but there are a number of other places along Poway Road that are the similar style. The Kaminsky's have been there a few times. Whether you're going there for that kind of barbecue, or whether you're going to Smokin' Jay's, you're probably going to get a good meal. Whether you're going to Taco, or you're going to Chamoy. I've enjoyed Chamoy a number of times, or a Brick House, or the Barn, or a lot of Mexican food places.
Do you ever find it's weird that El Armando's is still there, and that lot wasn't included in the Commons plan?
Yes, there's a lot of these odd little left out ones. So, but yeah. Oh, and somebody just said Mainstream. Mainstream is I've been there a number of times. I haven't been since they reopened, because they just recently reopened. So I haven't seen their, I guess they have the patio in the back. But yeah, before the pandemic, we've been there a number of times for breakfast, lunch, dinner, the whole 9 yards. So.
Well, that's where they have the secret council meetings, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why I went, obviously.
My wife and I love going to the Brig. That's a great place just for a drink and some fish tacos. Yeah. There's a lot of great places on Poway Road. We've just recently, just discovered some Thai places there. So yeah.
Iron Pan Thai Kitchen.
No, the other one, was it Ladle? Is it Thai Ladle?
Oh, that one is that over by Rosario's Pizza?
I think so. Yeah.
That's over by the what is it called over there? Yeah, Big Lots. I want to say Big Lots Shopping Center. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's just so many great restaurants. So I make it a point, like when we, it's like one of those nights where, what do you want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want? So I'll go on Yelp, and then I'll look at Poway, and then I'll sort it by the user score in descending order, and I start at the top with the 5 stars. And I just work my way down the list, and trying new places. It's like restaurant roulette, and you stumble across some really good food that you never had any idea the place even exists. So,
yeah,
cool.
there are a lot of places in Poway that are just you almost wouldn't know that they're there, but obviously they're doing well, because people still, that's their go-to. You'll see that if you ask, what's your favorite pizza? Yeah, you'll get a dozen different suggestions. What's your favorite Mexican food? Dozen different suggestions. And you're like, wait, I've never heard of that one. Where are they? And you find out where they're at, and you're like, oh, okay, we'll have to go over to that and see what's going on there. So yeah, there is a diversity of quite a few different types of food. The one I'd say that is most lacking across just Poway in general would be your Italian, like specifically Italian. When Dominic's left, it was one of the few, and since then it's kind of like, there's choices that are Italian-esque, but there's not like a full-on, you can get all of the choices of an Italian restaurant that we found that really kind of filled that gap. So, but other foods, they're pretty much well covered. I mean, we cover a lot.
What's the name of the place that's, God, I can't remember the name. And it's Italian, and it's right by Target.
You're talking about the Via Capri?
Yeah.
Yes.
That place is surprisingly good. I mean,
yes.
In a shopping center, you're not sure, what you're going to get, especially takeout. You walk in there and it's like, whoa, this is like a nice restaurant.
Yeah.
So that I thought they have good Italian. Back when my kids were in high school, they used to work at Mama Cella's, but that's in Rancho Bernardo. But it's off like where like Lomica and Bernardo Center Drive, like there's a Jack in a Box and a Taco Bell over there, or Jack in a Box and Carl's Jr. But in there at shopping center, there's a Mama Cella's. That's a really good kind of mom and pop. But anyways, that's RB. Okay. So anyways, a few more comments are coming in. We invite your comments and questions in the live stream. Just type them in. Mariana Benedict Basila said, I'm glad to hear Chris's articulate and informed response to the Prop 22 question.
Thank you,
question. Chris was very articulate and really made his case strongly. So yeah, right on. And then look at Delana Olps chiming in. We had sushi a couple of times. I picked it up from Izumi and brought it home. And that's the one way on the west end of Poway Road, right?
Yes, that's the one. Actually, it's next to Coney Island. It's on the corner there, Izumi.
Yeah, that's a good place. I used to go there quite a bit. It's funny, you go on little streaks where you go to a place over and over again for a while, and then you lay off.
Yeah,
I had a streak going with Izumi for a while. That was a good place. So Kevin Kennedy says Bua Thai is our Thai spot. So right on. So yeah, the restaurant recommendations are always good on the podcast here. Let's we talked about the propositions, right?
Yes.
So let's get to Measure P in Poway. And so now we were chit-chatting a little bit before we got started about Nextdoor. And I had been recently, I don't normally go on Nextdoor. I'm usually, my social media is Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, but there's a lot of active conversation on Nextdoor about Measure P. And it's getting heated. I mean, it's pretty hot discussion. In some cases, there are some names there that you recognize, like Nick Stavros is out there making his case. But there's other people I don't even know. And boy, that people, especially here in, I live off of Stone Canyon, there's a lot of hardcore no on P people here. There's also a lot of strong yes supporters. So I'm interested in your thoughts on this proposal. And especially, there's been some interesting conversation with Chris Cruz on her South and North Poway votes page, where she is seeing the development of, the farm in Poway as some kind of another proxy for the North versus South Poway divide. So interested in your thoughts on the project and maybe some of this North versus South Poway stuff that we're hearing from a lot of people.
Yeah, so it's interesting with Nextdoor, just quick side topic. The ability of posting there, I mean, you can hit pretty much all of Poway, but some conversations that people have told me about or, sent me screenshots of or whatever are selective to very specific communities based on Nextdoor's community, right? Like, this isn't anything with districts. This isn't what, we call Garden Road, but in Nextdoor, I think they have a Garden Road North and a Garden Road South. And, so it's interesting that, there is that kind of specificity. And then you have something like Measure P, where it's all Poway gets to vote. And occasionally you'll see that conversation where it's, just the Stoneridge or something talking about it.
Yeah,
and
right.
I can't join to go, hey, I got my 2 cents to join it, So not always, but that happens somewhat regularly with certain very specific areas. So if you're talking about like the Commons, it happens where they're like only over there talking about it. Or if you're talking about the lot on Twin Peaks getting developed. Only the Twin Peaks area is, the one that's talking about it. And then I just get the screenshots. It's like, well, I can't really join. I can make my own post, I guess, but so that's my dislike of Nextdoor, is that kind of, we don't want your outside opinion, even though as a city we're going to decide one way or another from council, right? And realistically, some of these issues will affect us all, or we will all have a vote, right?
Right.
When we're talking about Poway Road, if you come to Poway Road, it will affect you how much traffic there is. Even if you're just at the stoplight once, it will start affecting you. If you're talking about, Measure P, this is a citywide vote. And if you're talking about the Twin Peaks thing, that's a council decision. So you need all of council's input, and they're all across Poway. So, these kind of excluding things kind of drive me away from Nextdoor in some cases. I mean, I still try to review it, but, I know my ability to is limited based on those kinds of things happening. So with regard to Nextdoor, though, and that conversation for Measure P, I'd have to say that, there's a lot to unpack. I mean, you could just look at the agenda item when they approved it. It's like 4,000 pages, I want to say, give or take. And there are a lot of specific issues that people kind of, it's their one item voter issue for Measure P, right? So when you look at it, it comes down to, what do you think you're going to get out of it? Pros and cons. What do you think you're going to lose? And when I really looked at it, the nice thing, I will say, pros that, I've been able to reach out to and been able to get a hold of Kevin McNamara with fairly easily. And that might be because I'm a candidate. I haven't heard people say I can't get a hold of him. So I'm going to give it to him that he's available.
He is generally very available. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm just going to give that to him. I mean, if people start telling me he doesn't answer my calls, then all right. But for the most part, I've not heard anybody saying that. So I'll give him that pro. So when you go and you want to have a question or you have an issue, you can talk to him, or he can go find the answer, which is what frequently happens with my questions if I have them. And that's nice. That's kind of the way I would expect development to go. Questions get answered, or they can find the person that's going to give you the answer. And my biggest thing is being able to tie that back to what's in black and white, what the actual plans that were approved have in them. So in this case, we have, I guess the big issue to start with was in June, they approved the draft specific plan. When you talk about it being a draft, I want to know when it's going to be finalized and what's changed between the draft and the final version. And are we having another vote from council? I'm pretty sure that's no, we're not having another vote. Probably after the election, because they can't really approve things before the election that are contingent on an election. And we don't know the changes, because if we don't get a council meeting, it'll just be what's changed, right? So we'll have to go look to find what's changed. That to me is a big concern. And I get that there are certain parts of that are outside of control of, individuals, because they are contingent on an election. But it is that questioning, like, hey, is this really going to be, WYSIWYG? What you see is what you get. That's the starting point where I came into things a lot with this. And then I started asking more and more questions. So when we look at it, there's the EIR. That is a fascinating bit there. And, I'm not going to get into who paid for it, how it was made, that stuff. I'm just going to go over what's contained. One of the big things that's contained in there. It has 4 different plans for what can happen with that property. Nothing, which we already know what nothing is. So don't need to talk about that more. The current plan that is approved, 160 homes on the, 60 or 40 acres or something like that. Again, that's been pretty well articulated, so shouldn't need to talk about it. But there's 2 other plans that are kind of just nobody knows about. And when you look at what people are saying are their problems, it's kind of weird that nobody knows about these plans, and that this wasn't a big item at the council meeting to talk about. This wasn't something that was put out there for the community to know about, because they're less density. They're reduced density plans for development of the same lot. And when you look at what people mostly are complaining about, it's traffic due to density or just density. So it's traffic or density are the two biggest complaints across the board that I've seen. And, you know, when you look at, there's another possible alternative or two, actually, that's why did we not talk about this? And I can speculate it's due to profits and feasibility of, hey, this isn't worth our time if we develop less. But the EIR has its own answer for it and says, you know, that it's just, they're self-fulfilling answers that, you know, it's kind of like, well, if we do nothing, then nothing happens. Yes, you're right. Or it's less dense, so we don't have the density necessary to really build a community. Okay, you know, it's those kind of answers where it's like, well, yeah, you build a community and then the density of the community is set by whatever you're building. It's not the other way around. You know, you could have two homes. That could be a community. It's a very small community. It's you and your neighbor, but that's a community. You have 10 homes. That's a community, right? You know, it's how big you want to make it. And in this case, it could expand to the area there, the surrounding properties, to say that's a whole community. But that's kind of the self-fulfilling answer. It's not a big enough community, or it's not a community because it's only two homes, or whatever, you know, the lower density ones are. But when I see that people's problem is traffic and density, and they already have this identified as a, we don't want to do that because the EIR says we shouldn't do that because it doesn't do what we want it to do. It's that loss of representation. You know, the voters didn't really get to see that. I mean, unless you go digging through a council agenda. And it wasn't talked about at the council meeting. And, you know, at the end of the day, if that solves the problem and that's that common ground, that compromise, if you will, then why are we not having those discussions? And, you know, what's the real, I guess, bottom line here? We went with the most dense, and there's two other less dense proposals that could offer benefits to the community, arguably, that kind of counter the concerns. So why did you not do that? Why are you fighting the fight for more density? Well, obviously, no matter what, there's profit. That is, you can't take that out of, you know. So
profit isn't necessarily a bad thing.
It isn't. And you know, so fighting for that profit, is it the profit that's driving this? Or is there something else there that you can then say, hey, this is really the reason? And to me, I don't see that. I see profit. I don't see, well, we need, you know, 160 homes because if you have 140, then what? I don't see what we're missing, right? That to me is the lost aspect. When you want a community that is concerned about, hey, you're going to overdevelop, you're going to cause traffic, you're going to impact other neighborhoods, you're going to impact the quality of life for surrounding neighborhoods, and you actually, they call that out with their traffic impact to say you can't turn into other communities. We're going to have barriers, so they're connected but not. You know, when you talk about those are impacts, then clearly that's going to be an impact that not only affects those other communities, so you had to take action, but it affects the community you're actually developing. And you have a solution: make it less dense and still make a profit. Not as much, but still make a profit. And so it comes down to, you know, I see this as a one, you know, we're pushing hard for the one time, this is it, we get it passed or whatever, the measure P. And if it doesn't, then they're like, oh, we're going to throw our hands up and we're done. I see two other alternatives there that are equally or more valuable and beneficial to the community based on their own inputs. So if this doesn't pass, you miss it by 5%. You could probably get that 5% from those people.
Are those two other proposals or options in the EIR? Are they both, they're both residential development, but just less density, less homes?
Yes, less homes. And I don't know how it impacts the commercial as much, but yes, it is less homes that is specifically called out. It's like, I want to say one, the least dense is like 40% less dense, and the other one was 20% or 10% or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, to me, it's, there will be profit made if this passes. If it doesn't pass, nobody makes profit, right? So at the end of the day, you want profit. Why are you not reaching out to your community and saying, hey, okay, this is too dense for you. We have this other one here. Is this good enough? How many more people can we sway now to then be on board with this product or this, development, as it were? And is that now enough to pass? But I have the feeling we're going to push for the most money, the most development, the most we can pack in there. And if it doesn't work, we're going to throw our hands up in the air and we're all going to walk away from the table. And to me, that's not the right answer. That to me says you aren't invested in the community as much as you are the project and making the dollar. And if you're invested in the community, you're still coming back to the table. Like, odd example, Fairfield is still coming back to the table after 2 years of terrible proposals.
Right.
But they're still coming back, right? Are they doing the outreach? Not to any degree that we really see. Are the proposals good? No. But are they walking away? No. And all I keep hearing is, if this doesn't work, we're done. We're walking away until a worse proposal or some other developer or whatever happens. And I'm just like, well, what kind of argument is that? To me, that says, oh, then you don't really care about the community. You're not invested in it if you don't get your way.
Well, I think if we already had one vote on it and it was turned down. If Measure P fails, then at what point do people just take that as the community just doesn't want to build anything there at all, period?
But is that the case? The previous proposal was, we don't know what's going to be built. It was way more vague. This one is, we've got a decent plan and it's too dense or too much traffic, right?
The other one was less dense.
It was
condos, 55 and over. There was still a golf course there.
Yep.
And that was shut down, I think, mostly because people had grudge mode with the property owner, Schlesinger. But it's interesting, you bring up density with Measure P. And it's funny how this works both ways. Like, on one hand, if you take the number of homes, divided by the amount of space that exists in the entire property, it's not that dense. But obviously the homes are all built in certain clusters. Yes. Where, they'll be, backed up against each other. But the other funny thing about this is, and it's why I brought up the North versus South Poway issue, is that one of the frequent complaints amongst our friends in South Poway is that a lot of the higher density projects go into South Poway, and that the people that make those decisions are generally city council members that often live in North Poway. And so that creates a little bit of this, a lot of friction with some people. So now we've got a case where they're actually doing development in North Poway, because usually the South Poway people said, you always do development in our area, you never develop your area. Well, now they're doing development or proposing development in North Poway. You could argue that it's high density. I know some people are saying that, and I think depending on how you do the math, that could be true. But still, it seems like I was surprised that Chris Cruz was so, and again, that's really a question for her. It's not really fair for me to bring up to you. But I was just surprised that this is seen within the lens of North versus South Poway, when it seems like, all the impact is going to be on people in North Poway, and the leaders in North Poway are generally supportive of it. So I just wonder how this is representative of the North versus South Poway battle.
So I think that, and this is my take on it, my opinion on it, that the perspective from a lot of people when you talk about North-South Poway divide is, think of the level of involvement, and again, this is credit to Kevin McNamara, that has gone to, hey, this is what our proposal is, and this is what we get from the community. Some of that also goes down to, he has to get it past the Prop FF vote.
Exactly.
Then you take on South Poway, the Outpost, for example. There's no Prop FF protection. There's no real discussion within the community other than the Poway Road specific plan that they point to. And then same thing with Poway Commons, Fairfield, so on and so forth, where it's just council decides. And the community input when we go to a council meeting is, well, you should have talked at the Poway Road specific plan. Sorry, you weren't there for that. And I'm like, this is a new development, even though it's the same plan. Their input is valid because this is a different development. Yeah. Because we don't have Prop FF to protect it.
Right,
the
that's
closest,
a fair point.
Yeah, the closest we have is the proposal that was going to be Matadi Meadows, which we talked about a little bit ago. that versus North Poway. And what you saw was, hey, we don't want to lose Prop FF. We don't think that's a good lot for it. That's way too dense when you're talking about 40 homes on 8 acres. Same arguments kind of going across. And, when you look at the issue from a perspective of Poway, we say too dense for 40 homes on 8 acres. And then depending on the math, like you said, for North Poway, hey, it's still too dense is too dense. Or traffic is traffic, right? You got traffic there. You got people talking about traffic on Twin Peaks. You got the concerns of traffic and how it'll impact for Big Stone Lodge, even though I think there's deeper issues there. So when we're talking about the issues are the same across the board. I think the problem is, how is the community's voice being heard? And when you look at the concessions, the amenities of the farm, when you compare that to amenities of Outpost or Commons or Fairfield's last proposal, there's this clear divide of those are amenities, these are not. And the amenities are in North Poway, the amenities are not in South Poway. When you're talking about the Fairfield's great one, we're going to put in a traffic signal, which the city may have required anyway, and that'll help with traffic, which is really an amenity.
That was a cluster.
I'm sorry, that
was
you're
bad.
going to fix our traffic problem with a stoplight.
Yeah.
That's going to be the amenity for you to be 4 stories tall. I mean,
right.
And so you look at that and you say, it's obviously profit is the name of the game, but there are clear amenities in North Poway when you're talking about pickleball courts, farms, like literal farms to make food and produce, multiple gathering locations and things like that. And then you look at South Poway and it's not.
Well, let me give you a devil's advocate. Let's say that there was a proposal to build on the Metate Meadows that offered all these amenities that we're talking about. Would you support that? I'm guessing you wouldn't.
How dense? That's the question. If you take proportional density down, I guess, and are we talking about a full 40-acre one with 8 acres? Like, I don't.
It seems like most people that are supportive, and again, I'm not saying we should build on Metate Meadows, but most people that are supportive of protecting Metate Meadows don't want any development at all, period. Right? They just want to keep it virgin.
And I definitely see that. There are the other issues, which we kind of mentioned, the soil and the other problems there. But when you look at the difference here, I compared them because they're as similar as you can get with Prop FF protections. But it's been said a number of times at council forums, the golf course for Stoneridge is disturbed land, I believe is the phrase. It's already had things done to it. Metate is not the same. It's actually mostly native. And so when you compare the two, you're taking land that is going to be developed probably by the state at some point if we don't do something with it, with Measure P and Stoneridge, and actual open space with animals living, coyotes, habitats, hiking trails, etc. There's that is a big distinction. And when you compare those, the amenities could be the same, the density could be the same. I think that shifts the value just slightly to say I wouldn't want that in Metate as a comparison to a golf course that's already been developed, right? It already has literal roads going through it. But when you take it from the perspective of, those kinds of amenities and a small scale development, could that work? Again, are they accounting for all the land issues? Are they accounting for the residents' concerns? Are they accounting, there was no effort made for the Metate proposal to do those kinds of things. Whereas I feel that Measure P, well, I will just make this clear, I don't support right now, I'm not in favor of. While I feel they've done a lot in community outreach, I don't see that happening in South Poway. When they, compare development to development, what is it, 2018? It was get the signatures on there, get it on the ballot. We can do what we want if it passes. And then Measure P, it's literally, this is what we're going to have. This is how it's going to be. Let's talk to council. Let's talk to the community. Here's my phone number. Here's, it's a night and day difference. And so until you can get that level playing field, which we don't see, North and South divide still exists, and we don't get the same amenities, we don't get the same treatment because we don't have those same protections. The only close place that we would have that are out off of Poway Road, going out towards the 67, and Matade. Those are our fights to keep, and North Poway has everywhere almost that's protected by it.
Well, I think in the case of Stoneridge, the proposal that was on the ballot in 2017 was similar to what you said. This is what it is. Let's get it through. Let's try to pass it. There was a lot of community outreach, and that failed. And so that's why I think, even you admit McNamara is really going above and beyond to try to explain it. People are going to vote how they vote based on their own values.
Yes.
But it's interesting how we're getting into this election season, and like I said, on Nextdoor, man, it was hot. People were really amplified and emotional about it. It was just kind of amazing to read. I do want to read some of these comments that have been coming in from our viewers. Kevin Kennedy says, "I love profit." So, and then Michelle Wield says, "Thanks for letting us know about the other two options on the farm. I now know how I'm voting, how I'm going to vote." Excuse me, I stumbled over that. I now know how I'm going to vote. Mariana Benedict Basila says, "Will there be any low income or affordable housing in the development?"
That's a whole big topic about affordable housing. But no, there isn't. As far as I know, they have said they're buying out. So for the farm, that is. Exactly.
And so I know that's an objection by a lot of people, is that if it doesn't have affordable housing, then it's a no. And again, that's a whole other topic. And then Mariana goes on to, she was referring to the farm development. And then Delena Olps, or a couple of trees and picnic tables as a park right off of Poway Road versus a butterfly habitat. Yeah, that's a fair objection. And then Mariana goes on to say Matade Meadows is in the MSRP cornerstone habitat. I don't know exactly what that means, but I know that it's a habitat. There's natives,
conservative
being protected. Yeah. So, it's just interesting. So if, all these hypothetical scenarios, right? Like if Vaus wins his election, how does the seat get filled? If the Measure P passes or doesn't pass, then what happens? We are a city in flux, Chris. There's a lot going on in Poway.
Well, and so it's funny. So I said, I'm not in favor of Measure P, make it clear, because I know there's people that'll choose based on that. Whatever, it is what it is. I think you should go do your research. I can give you the facts. I have no problem being objective about it. I said what I said. And like I said, McNamara is very readily available. Feel free to reach out to him. I'm making my decision based on those kinds of things. And that doesn't mean that if this passes, I'm going to be up there like, I wouldn't have supported this. No, that means my goal at that point is this was passed by the city. I want to hold them to as close to or exactly what they said they were going to do at the end of the day. If this passes, that's what the next fight is making sure that they're doing things as the plan says. No bait and switch, no boogeymen.
I think McNamara can't change the plan, can he? I mean, once it's approved by the voters, that's it.
So the vote right now is for the farms as in the draft specific plan. The draft was what was approved. The final still can have changes. Whether or not those are council approved changes or whether those are staff approved changes, there's a lot of language in there that I had mentioned to him I was concerned with as far as what could be done. The other part of that is, as a planned community, it's a bit like trying to think of a good analogy here, like one of those puzzles where you have 1 through 15 and then a blank for 16. You shuffle it around however you want as long as it fits in the square. So right now it says 1 2 3 4 5 going across, but you could shift it around to make it all mixed up as long as it fits in the square and still meets the criteria of the deed restriction, the 50 feet from the property boundaries, and the San Diego County Water Authority right of way. But everything else could be shifted, and how much shifting could happen remains to be seen. So it's not a true, yes, this is exactly what we get, and that would be my fight as council to say this is now what we get, and this is what the voters voted on, knowing this is what we get. I'd push for that.
Well, then we're hearing different messages because Kevin McNamara says that's the plan. And once it's approved, he can't change it.
And see,
So,
I absolutely believe that, but I know the black and white of the legal text allows for these changes. Just like the EIR said, there were 2 other proposals that could have gone through or been brought up. It's those little things. And that doesn't mean that they have to be used. It doesn't mean that there will be change. It just means that is a possibility. And we, and maybe you do, I don't know, we, the community for the most part, and probably council, have no visual check to say that option between Schlesinger and McNamara means we don't deal with Schlesinger, and McNamara's word is what we're dealing with. We don't know what the agreement is other than the party that's vested, which is Kevin in this case. And, that's no fault of his own. And I totally support the business idea of this. And I would love for him to have control versus Schlesinger. But because we don't know how much influence or how much change could happen or how much control or what shifts could happen, we don't know any of the legal ramifications for that transition. We know supposedly it transitions to Kevin after the vote. But what does that mean? Is that mean
Kevin buys it?
Well, I would expect it means he buys them out, right? That's
my understanding is that he has an option to buy it.
Yes.
If Measure P passes. So if he buys it, Schlesinger's out, McNamara's in charge.
Yes.
Right?
So that's what I understand it as. But it's an option to buy, right? So do you have to buy
he's invested $1 million.
I know.
So of course, if it passes, he's going to buy it. He's not going to suddenly not buy it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Then there becomes the buy, develop, run into the problems, that could happen. I want the things to be the way they're said, and I have concerns over what we can't see. That doesn't mean that they're going to manifest. Again, they're my boogie, if you will. But those are the things that I see as concerns that down the road, it's an option. And then Schlesinger, he's the other party, right? So this is based on a vote. Is the vote legally binding to make sure the option's available, or is there some other trigger to make it available? Is this some gentleman's agreement where, because look at Measure P's text, it doesn't say there's the option in there. It just says this will allow for development and blah, blah, blah. And then the option's kind of this, hey, by the way, if that passes, I get an option to buy the property. It's not a part of, as far as I've seen, the legal text to say, you vote and pass this, I get to buy or have the option to buy. So I see that other trigger, whatever that trigger is for the buying, as separate from the vote. And that's where my concern is, because Schlesinger can back out. He's not exactly the most nice character, I guess, by a lot of people's standards. So, those are what I see as a problem. And then we've already voted, and Schlesinger backed out, and now he owns it, and it's voted down for Prop FF. And then what happens? Now, does that happen? I don't want to live in that world. That's our, crazy conspiracy world, right? But as a council member, our entire council should be fighting to ensure that the plan as they approved is what we get. And at the end of the day, that's what I would do. Even if this passes, if I didn't support it, I'd still be saying, that's what you guys approved. This is what we want. I don't care if you didn't offer McNamara the option and backed out. This is all you can approve.
Well, I would imagine it's got to be part of the 4,000 pages, right?
I have not seen anything on that. But again, it's a lot of pages. And
it seems like it would have to be, because the city would have to know who that property owner is and who they're dealing with. And if Schlesinger and McNamara have an agreement, then that would have to be part of the plan. I mean, because it's like you, to your point, it's one of the most fundamental components of the plan.
Well, yeah.
Who owns it?
Exactly. And that's why it's like the draft based on the vote, but then who owns it and the option. It's like layers of ambiguity and options and changes, and a great picture.
Not be ambiguous. It might be in the 4,000 pages.
It might. I'm sure he's probably emailing me right now. How dare you talk about this? And here's where it is in the plan. And hey, if that's the case, I will stand here and tell you it's in the plan on this page, or make a post about it if I need to.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, those are my concerns. And every time I have a concern, it's more and more digging is needed. And I'm like, these should be easy questions. I mean, they're not. Okay. But they should be questions that were asked. And, the fact that these aren't already known things, council didn't already address these at the meeting. It's kind of like, well, why? This should be, we know what's going to happen, how the transition is going to happen to the legal degree we can, as much as possible, because it's already in the black and white. If it's not, we need to know why and why we can't hear about it and how that's still going to happen.
Then we just need to find out. I mean,
yeah.
I would, now I'm not going to read 4,000 pages.
Come on.
Okay? It'd be like one of those senators in DC getting a bill and they have to vote on it in 24 hours. And it's 4,000 pages, which actually does happen.
Oh, no. Yeah, absolutely happens.
But hopefully there are people that I trust that have read it. And I don't know who those people are. So
I'm sure they're going to be chiming in one side or the other. And like I said, if I'm wrong, please let me know, because I've been wrong before it happens. But at the end of the day, when we hear about people's concerns, when I hear about them, I try to go find the answers. These are my concerns. I haven't tried to find the answers. I've been running a campaign. Measure P is being voted on at the same time I'm being voted on. So my vote, I want to be my vote, and you guys decide. I'm more concerned with my campaign than I am with trying to, either go for or against Measure P. That's its own separate thing. Let that campaign do its thing. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on whether or not this is in there. I just have my concerns, and that's currently what's structuring my vote. I've had a lot of questions answered because other people have asked them, and I've passed them on to McNamara, but some of them I'm just like, why weren't these asked? I hold that as a council responsibility. They weren't done. I don't know. They aren't easy to find. And rather than go find them, that just kind of influences my vote, because it's not an upfront process, and I can't agree with things like that in most cases.
Well, this is what I love about you, Chris, and is that you do the digging and you do the homework. And you've got a campaign to run. You're not going to be, the devil's advocate for Measure P at the minutia level. Chris Cruz, I think, does a really good job of this too, in doing the due diligence and holding politicians accountable. We need more of that in our city. And I love that about you. And I'm, because my bet is that if you weren't running this cycle, you probably would have read many, if not all, of those 4,000 pages, right?
I mean, I've read a lot of it.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit left.
Let's move on. Okay, so we're like at 2 hours and 15 minutes. Kevin Kennedy said that is how BMR was developed. The plan changed over the years. What's BMR?
Black Mountain Ranch. I want to say maybe
Yeah.
Black Mountain Ranch. Maybe he'll chime in.
That's Penasquitos, right?
Yes, I want to say that's. If that's in Poway, BMR. Ooh, man, I feel bad for not knowing.
Yeah, I was a CMR. I know what
okay,
that
I'm
is.
right. I'm right. Woo, all right, Black Mountain Ranch.
Okay, yes, okay, there it is. So I know you're campaigning. You've got a day job. You've got 2 children. I mean, you are a busy man, right? So when you're not doing all this stuff, man, what do you do for fun? I mean,
I'm a gamer, hardcore gamer.
Really?
Yes. Oh yeah. So I mean, you'd say like I have that when I'm not doing this. Well, on top of this that you've already said, I'm on site council for the school. I'm the parliamentarian for the GRES PTA. I'm on the district site council or district advisory committee for Poway Unified. So I mean, and baseball's not really going right now, but I was doing that. And
wow.
So there's a lot more other things, but when I'm not doing all of that, I sleep all the time.
Well, not with a small child, you don't much.
No, she's wonderful. She actually sleeps through the night right now. She actually sleeps, I want to say 10 to 12 hours a night.
Awesome.
We've been absolutely blessed with children that sleep through the night. I mean, our son, when he was born, maybe a day or 2 later, slept through the night.
A day or 2 later?
Oh yeah, it was the night of his birth in the hospital. They come in at like 6 a.m. to check on him, and they're like, "Oh, you guys probably didn't get much sleep. It's okay, we'll take care of the baby," because they change the baby for you and stuff. And I'm like, "What time is it?" "Oh no, I've been asleep for like the last 6 hours." They're like, "Wait, what?" Like they were like super concerned about the baby and everything. I was like, "No, I slept like a baby. The baby's good. We're all good. All right." No, she sleeps through the night. The first 2 weeks she was not sleeping through the night. And she goes through these little shifts. We get a week of, flux where she's like her new sleep cycle, or she wants to eat in the middle of the night or whatever it is. But for the most part, we've been lucky. But when I'm not doing that, it's helping my son with school as much as possible. That's been, changing dynamically over the last, couple months with pandemic and everything else. But then it's playing games with him. He plays, whatever the game of the day is, or he wants me to play. And so I play a lot of games. Most games are almost as involved as all of the other stuff I'm doing, because it's like RPG stuff. I don't do like sports games for the most part. I like racing games, don't have very many. Don't really do first-person shooters because for me it's one, kids, and two, the other part of that is there's not really fulfillment for that. Like I want developed characters, major stories, the drama of what I do in my day-to-day, but through another world, kind of fantasy, RPG, that kind of thing. That's what I do in my time as much as possible, which isn't a whole lot right now.
Right on. Well, geez, yeah, I mean, you're a busy man. I knew you did a little bit of that site council work for Poway Unified, but I didn't know to the extent that you did it. And then, I've coached Little League and girls softball, wonderful experience, but that's a lot of time too, so, you're good for you. You're one of our community dynamos, man. Just make a Poway a great place to be. Do you stream? Do you like to watch certain shows?
So sometimes, so in between, if I can do gaming on my own, then I'm doing that. Otherwise, it's watching whatever my wife's watching, or the quick gaming I could do on my phone if I can. But yeah, it's limited because if she's on the TV's taken. We can stream some things that we'll watch together, but then we have our shows, and then we have our family shows. So it's hard to watch what we want to watch when the kids are awake.
Well, okay, we won't have a real exploratory here on children's shows, but let's talk about the adult shows. Like what are the most recent ones that you've watched with your wife that you've really enjoyed? I'm just curious.
Oh man, just recently. I'm trying to think of the name of one because we just started one. I mean, we like a lot of shows that, were they're not new now. we're definitely playing catch up on a lot of TV.
I do that too.
Like Parks and Rec, everyone's like, "Oh, it was so wonderful." We're like, "Oh, yes, it was or is for us." But we don't watch too many series shows. The last one we really watched was The Good Place. Really enjoyed that one. It was good, little goofy comedy. But when we watch TV, most of the time it's investigation, discovery. It's learning about all of those kinds of things that go on with police work, detective work, the whole nine yards, as far as interesting things you'll find in communities you used to live in or live in now. And that is always surprising, but it's like somebody else did the work, so I don't have to.
I just finished watching The Expanse.
And
it's a sci-fi series on Amazon Prime, and I think it was originally on the Sci-Fi Channel, and then they discontinue it, and Amazon Prime picked it up. It's really, really good. It's kind of like a Cold War between the people of Earth and Mars and the people on the asteroid belt, and they have all these factions that are in grudge mode against each other, and then a alien life form enters the picture and changes everything. It's a really, really good show. So I just finished that.
Awesome. I've seen advertisements. I haven't watched.
It's good. So let's jump just a few more things, man. 2 hours and 22 minutes. Delena chimes in. She says they play a lot of Zelda.
Yes, yeah, that happens.
So I looked. You were on Facebook, and you were kind enough to take the questions that you were asked in the profile from the Poway Chieftain, and you shared the entire answer because they had edited it down, which I know irked you a bit. But that's kind of the business that they're in, I think. But at any rate, one of the things that you were concerned about was the gerrymandering of the district boundary lines. And I'm interested in your opinion. Like, let's just assume that you're elected and you're successful and on the board. What do you think is the right process to draw the lines? And right now, is there any egregious violation of fairness in the way the lines are drawn today? What do you think?
So, two big-ish questions, but we can definitely cover both. I absolutely believe that here next year, when we start getting census results, that the lines will have to be redrawn. Whether that be the trigger based on population, whether that be the trigger based on ethnicity. I have that feeling that the 2010 numbers aren't really going to cut it in
big changes in Poway since 2010.
So that's the first step. So when we acknowledge that probably is something that's at stake with this election, that's kind of not talked about much. Then we have to get to how the lines are drawn, what process is used. I kind of like that California's had a redistricting agency and third party outside the bounds of a council or controlling party control for redistricting. And I would love to look into that because obviously I don't know time limits for redistricting. I don't know how that triggers the census. I don't know nothing about that. I haven't looked yet because if I'm not on council, I'm going to save myself a little research here for maybe a couple months. But that'd be the first step, is diving into that and starting to learn how long we have, what can be done, what can't be done. And I know our current city attorney was a part of the redistricting process. They were the firm that helped Poway redistrict. So there should be a wealth of knowledge already at City Hall about what can be done or can't be done there. But that'd be kind of the first step, is figuring that out. Then it's really what the numbers show. I have my suspicions about what they'll show, but I could be way wrong, and with that, it's then how the lines get moved around or changed, or if we're just starting from scratch or what the case is. I would like to see outside the box ideas for redistricting. Right now, if you were to ask any random person in Poway, not the people that have commented, they probably know, but any just random, not super politically involved person, and said, hey, what district are you in? I would argue maybe 50% of the time they would know. That probably is too high, but I'll give it 50%. And so do they know we have districts, one, and then do they know which one they're in? I'm going to go with it's not a very high number. And so what we end up seeing, same way with the school board in 2018, was this: why can't I vote for this person? I'm going to write in this person. And causes ballots to be very interesting, where people are writing in somebody for if they just look down, they were in that race, but not this race. And very, confused situation there that wasn't helped with an at-large council seat and 2 district seats in the last election. It was odd. Yeah. So when we look at it from that perspective, the first thing is educating people to understand what that is. The second thing is seeing what we can do. I don't have all the answers right now, but I can tell you, magic wand world. If I could, what I would do is I would essentially divide Poway into not north-south, east-west kind of, because that keeps a north and a south on both sides, essentially. But I would say we do something similar to that, and we have representatives that are available in each district every single election. So it's one person from one district each election, and you're electing the left side or the right side or something similar to that each election. Now, obviously I can make that argument north-south and then but to keep that fairness, if you will, I think an east-west almost serves a similar purpose and allows for those voices to be heard. But where that line fits on the district map and how the districts are drawn gets dicey. And then if it's even possible. But what this allows for is people would have the ability to vote every single election for at least one representative and mayor every 4 years, right? Right now, people are like, I can't believe I don't get a vote at all. I have no choice in my representative for another 2 years. And so this kind of offsets that. It's like I said, way outside the box, but that would be kind of that best of both worlds, if you will, where, hey, we're small enough, we shouldn't need districts, as some people argue, or, hey, we absolutely need districts because South Poway is underrepresented. This is that almost happy medium. And, I'd love to slant everything to South Poway, but my parents live in North Poway. Like I have, I like the South Poway area, and I know that there's that loss of a voice. There's that lack of representation that's been consistently and historically there. But that doesn't mean I want to go flip that and say, haha, we get all the representatives. That's ridiculous. We need good representation. Yeah, right. We need good representation across the board. And that's how we can get a community that is vested and involved and cares and really is looking for our future, as opposed to, some of our council live like surprisingly close, but those magical lines stop them from running against each other. So, I would like to really kind of do away with that as much as possible. And I think that, that middle split for an east-west would kind of do that, because you'd at least have to be east and west. Unless they live on opposite sides of whatever street it is. But, then it's North Poway can't say they have the advantage. South Poway still has a voice. And generally speaking, the larger percentage of the population is in South Poway, where the development is.
Right.
So
that proposal, if I understand it correctly, is you would draw one line down the center of Poway, make it an east-west split, and have 2 at-larges in each one of those, right?
Well, yes. You'd be District 1 or District 2, but you'd be that representative, and the 2 would split. Exactly. So it'd be a 2-year thing. So you're District 1, year 2, or odd years, or District 2, even years, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So that way it's the split. They're always odd year or even years, but you get what I'm saying. The presidential year or the other year. So.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact we have districts. I think it's great.
I agree.
Because not only is it great for South Poway, because ever since I've lived in Poway, I moved here in 1996. I've been hearing this over and over again that South Poway doesn't have representation, and now, District 4 is South Poway, so that's great. I also love the idea of being more closely connected with your representative. I think that's a good thing. And really selfishly, from the perspective of a candidate, it's actually good for them too, because they have less ground to cover. But what's interesting to me is that that lawsuit that came forward that was making the cities and everyone do the districting, that was typically driven really along, ethnic or racial objectives to make sure that underserved ethnicities or races were supposed to be getting better representation. But that didn't play out that way in Poway. It seemed like it was almost a purely geographical decision. And then I remember talking to Pete Neild about this, and he went through the numbers, and he said it was pretty good how they got the demographics pretty reasonably balanced between the 4 districts. I guess in terms of age and ethnicity, maybe not in terms of income, but I like it. I think it's a great thing for the city, but I agree. Most people would never know. Kevin Kennedy says most don't even know who their county representative is. And people don't know. People have lives, they're
absolutely. And I think the big thing here is, this is a once every 10 years thing, the redistricting or, the census, as it were. And so, yes, this will be a big deal because we just went into districts. And I think it'll be one of those points of reflection where a lot of people, mostly South Poway, were saying, hey, this line is garbage because you're kind of screwing us and underrepresenting us further, and then you're pushing it off to 2020 and all of these things. If that's how this shows up in the census, it's kind of like that vindication, that justification of, hey, we knew what we were talking about. Not that it has to be that way, but when I look at it, it comes down to how can we redraw these lines? I don't see a way of fairly drawing lines along roads, like, for example, Poway Road, right? I hear all the time people are like, oh, you basically represent my business but not my house, or you represent my house but not my business. Opposites. And it's because they're just on the other side of Poway Road or whatever the case is there. And it's that problem that I see as kind of dividing communities. When they were talking about it, they almost would divided North and South Garden Road. And that's one of those like, whoa, we have the same road in and out. You probably don't want to divide our community. And they still have, where you live would be District 2, or previously lived in Sycamore Canyon. That's District 2, but you have to go Garden Road into it. So
that's District 2?
That is District 2, yes.
My old neighborhood? Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So when you look at it that way, it is so not intuitive in some ways.
Yeah,
But
you're right. That
it's
should be
hard
just
to say. Yeah, it's hard to say, oh, this is a better way because of those limitations of population, of, demographics. Those are legal, restrictions that these districts must meet. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's like, well, how can we make this fair? And, I don't want to say they did a terrible job. They did an okay job. They, didn't violate anything, but they definitely took the advantage. And, those little lines that scoop out the one council so they're, in a different district are kind of like, really, guys? Like, just so you cannot run against each other? Come on, that's ridiculous. That's, my lights turned off.
Poway Unified was a lot more egregious in the gerrymandering.
Yes.
But yeah, it's hard to draw the lines, and then you always get into the situation that the elected officials are choosing the voters. So hopefully there's a really objective third party that can make really good recommendations.
Yeah. And that's what I'd look for. And, like I said, I have that way outside the box. That might be another interesting way.
I like that idea.
It's it still gets that involvement, and it really, I think, an east-west really shifts that dynamic from a north-south divide to maybe now it's an east-west divide. I don't know, but at the same time, it kind of says, hey, these issues affect us all, and we all need to come together as a community. And ideally, that is possible, but it might not be. I like Nextdoor, which we mentioned before, how they kind of have communities. And I would really like to make sure communities of interest are kept together. And I think Nextdoor has kind of already taken a really big swing at that, where our districting kind of failed at that. That's what I would try to start a map around. But at the time, it was, really rushed process because of the lawsuit, not because of our city.
Right.
And so, there were limitations. And so I'd like to see a really well done, thought out, involved process, huge community input, maybe a full third party like taking over. To make sure that there isn't the hey, this street here, so that I'm not competing against them and I can still be on council. Like, that's, to me, those are silly games to keep control, and that's the only way to really look at them. And when that's being done, it's hard to say that this is done in the interest of fairness. When you literally draw whoop, 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 and there are a few of them, it's that is no longer in the interest of fairness. That is self-serving to the extreme. And, you run a good campaign or you don't. Run a campaign and let another person speak for the other community. That's what you need to do at the end of the day. If that means I'm in a different community at the districting, whatever it is, it is what it is.
Who's done an east-west alignment roughly already in Poway is Little League. Poway National and Poway American. So Poway National is roughly the western side of town, and Poway American is roughly the eastern side of town. Of course, there are a lot of exceptions, but even that map is gerrymandered because they had to split the two little leagues in order to meet like the population per league requirements.
Yes.
And I heard the stories is back in the day, they wanted to protect certain players, so they made sure that they were either in the American or the National League. So there's always there's gerrymandering even in Little League.
Yeah.
Okay, I got a couple more questions. Are you still good?
I mean, I know people are going to be like, this is way too long.
It is.
But, I'm hoping people are live streaming and seeing it and asking their questions, and I'm fine with it. It's just there are issues, and when you're limited to a 1-minute answer, I feel that is as as bad as it gets. Even though I've done it, I stand by my answers. It's just there's so much more to talk about, and if you really want to know, I'm here for it. Reach out. Hopefully, you're asking here, and
this podcast is the opposite of the forums.
Yes, yes.
Kevin Kennedy says, I certainly don't agree with everything Chris says, but I do appreciate the awareness he has raised in our community. Thank you, Chris. So that's a nice comment.
Thank you, Kevin.
And Kevin goes on to say, does Chris Olps have any interest in politics beyond city council?
I'm pretty sure my wife would kill me if I ran for anything other than Poway politics. Actually, if I run again, she might do that anyway. So no, I have no interest in any of that nonsense. I mean, you say outside of Poway, that doesn't mean like, if I'm on council and they do this shuffleboard with the mayor here, if he wins, that I won't throw my hat in that ring. But within the city, I'm staying Poway.
Yeah.
Poway local.
You are hardcore Poway, and that's another thing I love about you. What it was interesting is on your long answers to the Pomerado News survey that they asked of the candidates. You talked a lot about infrastructure in Poway and having internet available, similar to what Chattanooga, Tennessee has done.
Yes.
Now, meanwhile, there's this other proposal that's come forward that Vaus is pushing to. I guess they passed it, I think,
Yeah.
to provide 200 homes, low-income homes with high-speed internet. So walk me through this whole idea of broadband internet in Poway and what your thoughts are. I mean, we can even talk about Cox and no competition, and it's a lot in there.
Yeah. So first, with Vaus's proposal, so the school board acknowledged and has had an open thing since April about anybody that needs internet, because we went to distance learning. I believe they've had around 500 respondents. They've replied to the state and acknowledged all of this. When the council thing came forward, I was concerned because they had announced and acknowledged it, the school district that is. So I was concerned we were giving money to a problem that had already been solved. Vaus said he's talked to them. I take it at face value. That is fine. Especially when we're talking, like they said, these are Poway residents that are being addressed, which might allow the district to reorganize their money to those outside of Poway and, more efficiently spend for both sides. The other side of that is the money that's coming in is pandemic related. So there are probably a lot of restrictions on how it's spent. So, I have no problem with it. I just wanted to make sure we weren't giving our pandemic money to the district as a little gift. Here you go.
Right.
We're not talking a huge sum of money. It was like $40,000 something. So when you're talking city and Poway Unified, that's pennies to them. So
right.
it is, it wasn't a lot, and it was pandemic relief funds. So I definitely appreciate the concern and, identifying it and making, a problem be solved. So it was kind of that smaller scope, but mine is, we have, and you kind of hinted at this, essentially a monopoly here in Poway. And that is a problem. Now you could get, what is it, HughesNet Gen 5 or Gen 17 or whatever they're on now. You could try for that. I know some people on that, and that does not work for a distance learning environment because of the buffering and the speeds and everything else. And if you live in the more remote areas, District 2, this really is the impact, because Cox doesn't have the citywide infrastructure out to those areas. Now, if you're more central, your Garden Road, I've got Cox. It's still not the best. It's actually
Phil Factor doesn't get Cox where he lives on Iron Mountain.
Yep. And so at the end of the day, we have a serious lack of high-speed internet, which, more and more often is becoming one of those, like, electricity, water, high-speed internet right there. It's almost at that point. And here's the real kicker. We have a pandemic that restricts access to places that had available internet. So you used to be able to say, I'll just go to the library and use the internet. I'll just go to these public facilities or whatever. Now you have restrictions on what could be done even there, amplifying the problem to a whole other level. And then obviously the load, we're talking about people working from home, the kids, the amount of need has dramatically increased. You took away locations that were previously available, and you basically have this recipe for a problem, a big problem. And when you look at it, the other side of that problem is all of this is on one provider. So even if we got the, let's say we all had a better plan, it's still on that one backbone from Cox. And if that goes down, we're all affected, at the end of the day. And you can see that if you look at Facebook, Nextdoor, almost daily these days. There's a post about, is this going down here? Hey, do you have internet there? And it's just an ongoing problem. So what we need, and it's sad to see from council, is we need other players at the table. At the base level, we need to bring other players to the table. We've essentially refused AT&T and said, hey, sorry, we got Cox, we're good. And, Cox invests a lot in the community, but we need investment in our actual services that they provide, as well as investment in, the second fireworks show that was great. I liked it. But, you're not a fireworks provider. You're an internet service provider. Let's stick to what you're good at and actually get that good, rather than hour-long show, which is then over and we're waiting another year for a second one, right? So, that's kind of my concern. They have a service they are not really providing, and we have no ability to hold them accountable because we have allowed them this monopoly. We have joint use agreements with them, and AT&T has no ability to come in. We can't have Google. We can't have, we don't have any of these players, and we aren't really, as far as I know, looking.
Well, let's make really clear about this, because I've heard different opinions on this.
Sure.
Does the city council make decisions on which broadband providers come into Poway?
So the provider is the one that has to have the interest, kind of like a developer, trying to come in. We can't go, you will build a Sonic. Sonic says, no, we're not building a Sonic, right? But at the end of the day, they've come to the table and council has said, no, that's what's happened. AT&T has said, hey, yes, AT&T has come to the table and council has said, you're not giving us something, so we're not giving you something, essentially. We are not allowing you to come in. Now, providers for internet typically have areas carved out for competitive.
It's like a gentleman's agreement, for lack of a better term. They split the territory.
Yes, and the reason for a lot of that is it's very expensive for them to put their infrastructure in.
Exactly.
So even if AT&T comes in, most likely they're piggybacking off Cox's and paying them a royalty or something like that to get started. But that doesn't mean they can't just go and lay their own new fiber connection or whatever the case may be. So with that in mind, I definitely see the upfront cost and the hesitancy of providers. But when you're refusing or actively driving away providers because you have this exclusive agreement with Cox, it kind of amplifies that. So I would want to see more providers, actively pursued to say, what can we do? How can we address this? But more than that, I think the city kind of needs to hold their feet to the fire and say, you know what? We need the bigger pipe. Whatever we got right now isn't cutting it. You need to start investing and, to take steps to really fight that. The city should look at what can we do? Where are those boundaries? Because I know Spectrum is kind of on one of the borders of Poway. Like some people can get that. I think AT&T is like right there too. And if we can't get it from Cox, if they won't do it, the city should step in and say, all right, we need to invest in and have our own municipal one supported by AT&T, supported by Spectrum, supported by whomever, where we start putting that infrastructure in when we're doing our 7-year road maintenance every, 7 years. We start putting in the pathways for it, and then it's our internet service that now they're buying the big pipe coming in, and then they're distributing it similar to how we distributed water, and we have a municipal, service. Then we could have things like municipal Wi-Fi, which hopefully has hotspots located places kids can go, like community park or wherever. But we really need to think outside the box. And obviously, this is not a cheap solution, right? Nothing's cheap in these perspectives. But when we are looking at it, there are ways to really offset those costs. And I think one of the things that we've missed is that boat of, hey, internet providers really want to do fiber, and we want to say you are the city. Like, what was it? Topeka, Kansas. I want to say they changed their name to like Google, Kansas for a while because Google put fiber everywhere, and it was great, right? So why are we not like diving on those opportunities, throwing our name in there? And there's a ton of different providers out there, and I get that it's expensive, but we need to have that as a priority and really start addressing it from the competition perspective, and then from the, hey, Cox, just step up your game and maybe we won't have to do this, and it's sad because it's one of those things, we're talking about development on Poway Road and how run down things are. That's the same exact problem with our internet. We're running on old infrastructure internet and trying to make it do new infrastructure things that fiber could do. And, we want to invest in our development. Well, hey, developer coming in, we want you to have everything all the way up to your point of demarcation for fiber ready to go so that all they have to do is go to Poway Road, wherever the transfer station is, and plug it in. You got fiber for your entire development. Why is that not something that's being talked about? That's how we get to that next level, and we offset the costs for Cox or whomever. We say, developers coming in, you need to put your plumbing in, you need to put this in, you need to wire for internet that's going to be, fiber related. Do you need to put parks in? You need to put all these things in there. And at the end of the day, we're instead allowing them a traffic signal for 4 storage, right? When you talk about amenities, if you told me you're wired for high-speed internet, fiber internet throughout the entire facility, I look at that as this is a possible amenity, not necessarily one I'm going to give you 4 stories for, but this is something good because you are spending a significant amount of money on it. All right, now we can start having conversations. You're going to have, the electric car charging stations, a certain number of those set aside. Now we can start talking about what you're doing and how you're providing. Maybe they're going to be free for residents or whatever. Now we can start talking about actual amenities instead of these arbitrary, things.
Do you think that there is a possibility that 5G or some future wireless technology would give us broadband capability, and that we wouldn't have to, dig trenches and lay lines in the ground?
Well, so that's the nice thing. Like I was saying, if we went to municipal, the 5G way of forward would be the cheaper way. You wouldn't have to do the trenches. You would start putting it on all the light posts, and then you're just putting up more light posts or figuring out how to, address the frequency of them because they are pretty close together as far as, distance there. I do see that as a possible future fix, but those, for the most part, those networks are cellular providers. And until they decide to shift, and also, some do already, like Verizon and whatnot. Actually, most of them have telecom and internet providers, but until they really make that shift, it's still that cellular bandwidth. And, there's a lot of things that can cause that to go down and can have problems. So it's kind of how do we mitigate or deal with those, or, what's the backup? Because if you're only 5G going out to, Iron Mountain, and then 5G goes down, well, now you're back on nothing.
Yeah, right.
So it does need kind of a backup, even if that's slower. So it really is that investment that's needed. But the short term, if they're going to go in and they're like, we're going cheapest, fastest, quickest solution, boom, 5G, let's go, done. All right, that starts the process. That really gets the ball rolling and shows that somebody's vested and they can get an almost immediate return. Verizon doing that, AT&T is doing that, T-Mobile's doing that. That's the immediate return on investment for them, and we get the benefit of, hey, we actually have some options for high-speed internet because right now we just don't.
Yeah, I'm all about more competition and more choice. And it's a shame if the city has been declining other high-speed options. I remember Dave Grush commented about this on Facebook, and he claimed that the city didn't make the decision, that it was entirely up to the providers to decide if they were going to come into Poway. So,
well, I believe that, it's the truth is somewhere probably in the middle. I'm leaning more towards council's cause, because at the end of the day, there are we want this, and then they say no, and what happens? All right. So the provider said no, but what did we put on the table? Like, what were we asking of them at the end of the day? Is it reasonable what we were asking? Or was it kind of one of those like, hey, Cox has given us, a couple $1 million on the back end for projects around the city. That's awesome. I don't know that that's true. I'm just making comments here. Is that the same thing that we're getting from you, AT&T? And then they say, no, well, sorry, we don't want you. That's kind of the way I look at it. Are we holding them to the same standard? And I think we have the joint use agreement in place. It's nice. It's comfortable. It's already there. And so somebody coming in, we want better. We want more. And if they won't do that, we don't even want to entertain them. And so we make the bar so high that they don't even want to come in.
Yeah. That's a shame. I think we need to have choice, but yeah, obviously it's a huge investment. I want to tell just kind of a funny story is, you're talking about, like, we always see those announcements on Facebook, or, hey, my internet's out, or what's going on in your part of town. Well, one time my internet went out, and I got on my phone and, wirelessly, and was like, hey, does anybody know what's going on? And no response. I couldn't figure it out. And then I went out, and my landscaper was here, and he was digging holes to move like a small palm tree to another location, and he shoveled right through the main line that comes into our house.
Wow.
I'm like, oh crap. So then we had to have Cox come out, and they were cool. They replaced it for free.
That's
All right?
awesome. Yeah.
Then a month later, it happened exactly the same thing again. I couldn't believe it.
Trees, man.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't. Like, he used the shovel again, and it went right through the line. Well, this time we had to pay,
Yeah.
but I was able to use my homeowner's insurance. God, what a mess that turned out to be. But yeah. So, anyways, we're like at 3 hours. I think we've kind of exhausted this. I don't think that there's some people that I think have been with us just about the whole time. I looked at the number of viewers.
Yeah.
But people will watch it. They'll listen to this. They're going to consume this in chunks. You know, 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there. Just to wrap it up, I mean, Chris, what have we left off the table? What else do we need to know about you and your campaign? What do you want to have some final closing thoughts?
So, I mean, you can definitely find out more about my campaign. Olps 4, the number 4. So OLPS, the number 4, Poway.com. You can email me, info@Olps for Poway. You can call me, 619-396-1605. You got to remember these numbers. And, you know, definitely if I've missed something that you'd have, or if I talked about something and you still have more to talk about, feel free to reach out, text, call, email, Facebook. I'm all over there. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, like I've said it a few times, there's these boogeymen of problems. You know, there are real problems, but they get amplified and turned into this, you know, almost conspiracy level for certain things. And you know, I can go over a quick one that we didn't talk about, but you know, climate action, real quick. Talked about that, and at the last meeting, the last forum, it was, oh, we'll just get sued out of existence, right? Something similar to that. I mean, maybe I put a boogeyman on top of a boogeyman, whatever. We'll get sued, right? Well, here's the interesting thing. I think the comment was San Diego is being sued, and so they've done it, and it's bad because they got sued. Over 10-ish, close to 10 years, they've been sued 6 times, cost of roughly $1 million total. And the reason they're being sued is because they are trying to create a program where you can buy out of your obligation to reduce greenhouse gases with carbon offsets. So they're not actually reducing anything. So yeah, if we make a program that doesn't actually reduce the problem, yeah, we'll probably be sued by climate action groups. Makes sense.
That's kind of like cap and trade, isn't it?
Yes, it's almost exactly like that program.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, if we make a bad plan, yeah, we'll get sued because we're not actually reducing and we're trying to claim the credits for reducing. So there's the money available to start the process and solve the problem, get all of these grants and things that actually allow us, you know, electric charging stations, more solar, you know, all of these different things that we won't even be able to access without a plan. And the concern is that our plan is bad, so we'd get sued. Well, I mean, make a good plan that says we're actually going to do the right thing, that starts with the research, that starts with the studies, that starts with the communities that have already done it. And so when you look at it, it's going to have this outrageous cost of lawsuits. There are over 26 lawsuits. It's public. You can look it up in the city. At least 26 currently against the city. Several well over $1 million. So I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb here and say that's a boogeyman, and we can actually get money as opposed to having a lawsuit. We should probably look at it a little bit stronger than be worried about a potential lawsuit when we already have so many. So
yeah, it just seems it's such an easy thing that, well, you want to have a good plan for climate change, but it's just such an easy thing to do. I mean, because they've already got things going on. They've already got, the city has solar, the city has LED lighting, you know, you put in some charging stations or something, and then you wrap a bow around it and you got a plan.
Yeah, we have verifiable things that reduce greenhouse gases. Well, we need a baseline, we need how much we're reducing, and we need a plan of how we can reduce further. And there we go, done. Like, this is
right there in front of your face. and then, you know, it's, you know, politically correct for a lot of people as well. You know, they'll like nod their heads and say, yeah, good, doing the right thing. So, it's interesting. So,
but yeah, like I said, there's tons of things we could talk about. And, you know, at the end of the day, I just want everybody to understand there is a perception, there is the black and white text, and then there is an opinion, right? there's a lot that kind of goes with what you can do. You have the perception, which is based on all of that and what we think could happen. There's opinion where somebody's trying to sell you on it. And then there's the fact of what is actually written down at the end of the day. Like,
of course,
we talked about the EARs, we talked about the agenda items. Those, it's laid out and it's very clear. So when you're looking at things, you have to kind of take that into perspective. Are they selling you something? Then they might have a vested interest in it. You might need to look at that and look further. And so at the end of the day, yes, I'm selling myself as a candidate. So are everybody else. But you have the black and white to look at. You have the perspectives. You have the positions we've taken. And you have, at the end of the day, what you want for Poway to make your choice.
Right on. I mean, like I said, Chris, I love what you do. You're very detailed oriented. You get into the details of the policy. You do your research. You're very good at communicating with people, sharing, what your discoveries. You're really good. I've noticed for a long time sharing things about what's going on with Poway, like the disaster. The disaster. What was it? It was a workshop, right? The disaster protection.
Yes.
That was like a drive-through thing, right?
Yes, they got two, but
yeah. And so you share information about that for everyone else. I mean, you're just a really good source of good info. And I love that about you. So, man, good luck in this campaign. It's your race is interesting. I mean, it's a three-way. You and Kaylin, I think everyone saw that coming. Frank jumps in at the last moment, where everyone's kind of learning about Frank. But then you and Kaylin both have young children. And like I said, I think that's a great thing about your candidacy. So I'm really interested, your race and Steve Vaus's race for county supervisor. I'm really curious to see how that's going to go.
Both of those will be dynamic changes to Poway depending on how they go, I think.
I agree. We've already said there's a radical transformation happening on Poway Road right now. And there's more decisions that are in the on-deck circle. Yeah. So those are coming, man. And yeah, right on. You've been fighting the good fight for South Poway for a very long time. So
thank you.
Right on.
Yep. So
okay.
Yeah.
So anyways, thanks everyone for joining us. Kevin Kennedy had another question about how does the city recover the cost of infrastructure. We just gone too long. We're like at 3 hours. So
I'll send him a message.
Yeah. But anyways, Chris, thank you very much. Good luck to you in your campaign. And this is episode number 175 of the John Riley Project. Thank you very much, friends. Bye-bye.
Thank you.